Okay, welcome everyone. We will call to order our Committee of the Whole meeting for the evening, and welcome everyone. We've been here what feels like
Forever.
24 hours already straight. That's not accurate, but we've been here a while and looking forward to another meeting. Not as long as staff, that's right. All right, we do have an agenda in front of us. Before we start, we will acknowledge and recognize that we work, live, and play in the city of Port Alberni, which is situated on the unceded traditional territories of the Sechot and Hupachesit First Nations. We do have an agenda in front of us. Are there any late items from committee members? Seeing none, any late items from our corporate officer?
No late items, Madam Chair.
Great. Then would somebody like to move approval of our agenda as circulated? Moved by Councillor Patola, seconded by Councillor Solda. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried, none opposed. And we have adoption of minutes. We have minutes from the meeting held at 6 p.m. on December 3rd, 2024 as presented. Moved to adopt by Councillor Solda, seconded by Councillor Patola. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed, and we will go to public input period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the committee. A maximum of 6 speakers for up to 5 minutes each will be accommodated, and for those participating electronically, please use the raise your hand feature, and we will call on you in the order in which you appear. Would anyone like to speak to council today? I'll go to Mr. Kannegeeser and then the gentleman here.
Am I going to be first again? You are. Well, good evening. I was here probably close to 2 months ago talking about property taxes and asked a number of questions, and most of all got responded. Thank you very much for all the city staff who responded. At that meeting, I think it was October 18th, you were presented with a schedule that showed the representation household property taxes. And that was the total taxes shown. And Port Alberni showed very well. We were third lowest out of the 22 surveyed. But what it didn't show was, until you get into the detail, was the total taxes, and all that you can really control is the general municipal tax. And in that case, when you analyze that, there were 5 island communities with a lower general municipal tax than Port Alberni, and there were 10 across the province with a lower municipal tax. So that got me thinking a little bit more about how we could analyze this a little further. At a meeting, the Committee of the Whole on November 19th, you were presented with a graph that shows the tax revenue changed from 2006 to the present, and it shows how the residential taxes, the actual cash, has gone up dramatically in that period. The next 2 pages of that presentation give a little clearer picture of that because it shows the percentage of tax collected over the years. Residential taxes in 2006 represented 40.6% of the taxes collected, where today it's about 60%. At the same time, major industry represented 40%, and today it's closer to 17%. The business tax percentage has remained fairly constant at 16-17% over that period. So I looked at the residential tax share percentage of those 22 communities. And Port Alberni is situated very well at 59% of the residential tax, and only 3 communities are lower. The range is from 42% in Fort St. John to a whopping 94% in Oak Bay. The business taxes in that same period, of the 22 surveyed, 9 are lower, 12 are higher. The range is from 5% of business tax collected in Oak Bay to 52% of the tax revenue coming from businesses in Fort St. John. Then I looked at what I was trying to get was an average of what our residents would pay, not a representative house, but the average residents. I found out that it's virtually impossible to get, and it's not fair to accommodate or to calculate it based on the residential houses, single family, which would be the representative house, because there's a number of tax classes within the residential class. And the one that's common is called the residential occurrences, how many different strata, all the different types of residential classes. So with the help of, with Andrew McGifford, BC Assessment Authority, and I searched through the financial plans of the 21 communities, I was able to calculate the average residential general municipal tax per occurrence. I divided the 2024 budgeted residential revenue found in those financial statements by the number of residential tax occurrences, class occurrences. The analysis, I'm pleased to say, closely mirrors the taxation of the representative household, which was presented to you in October, and that's good. I'm pleased to see that. 10 communities are lower and 10 are higher, so you're right in the middle of the pack. It may be interesting to note that the tax ranges from a low of $1,068 in Comox to a high of $5,187 per average resident in Oak Bay. Port Alberni sits at $2,352. I must conclude that the homeowners of Oak Bay are satisfied with their municipal taxes, $5,187 for the average home or average residence in Oak Bay. So what's the conclusion? Well, no one likes to pay taxes. Port Alberni property tax allocation compared to 21 other similar communities is very reasonable. The city enjoys the benefit of considerable major and light industry taxes. Business taxes have been kept similar share for years, and the residential taxes are in the middle range of the other 21 communities. So that's all good news. If I can just add a postscript. I really wish to applaud city staff and council for the one-page report that's usually found at the end of the 5-year financial plan that documents the taxation share by the various industry classes. And it compares it to the previous year. And it shows what the tax effect is for the typical residential home. When I searched all through the other 21 communities, very few produce such a document that's at least publicly available and easily found. I couldn't find most of them. So I'll conclude by saying a tip of the hat to Andrew and the staff for their transparency, accountability, and openness. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kannegiser, for taking the time to run all of those numbers and for providing your input, as always. As we know, there are an incredible amount of ways we can compare ourselves to other communities, and so it is challenging to decide which numbers to put forward, and we always will end up being accused of putting forward the numbers that look good and leaving out the ones that don't. And I think that's just the reality of there being so many different ways to look at these things. So appreciate your input on it. And I will just say that I think our council, regardless of all of that, recognizes the challenging financial position that we are in right now, and is looking for ways to ensure that we are spending every dollar that we have and that we collect in the most reasonable way possible. So we're looking at all options, even though I think that we are middle of the pack. I still think that many of our residents are finding the taxes and the significant increases on top of everything else challenging to handle. So I appreciate hearing your perspective. Public input period, would you like to come forward?
I'm going to try and keep this brief because I know you've had a heck of a day. Um, Also, this might not seem as important as the other things you're dealing with right now. But to me and our little group called Riders of Alberni Valley, or ROVE, it seems pretty important. And it might leave a lasting legacy that even outlasts the new pool that hasn't been started yet. Do we have a slideshow ready?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry,
So we do have a delegation set for you next. However, I didn't see any other hands up. Oh, okay. Yeah, we do have another speaker who'd like to speak for public input period. So sorry about that. You are in the delegation section, which comes up next. So I'll call on you in a moment. And my apologies for not knowing that you were with Rove. We'll get to you in a few minutes. What it means is you actually get longer to speak if you like. So. Thank you. Go ahead, Joseph.
Hi, Council and Mayor and those that are in attendance in the audience. I wish I had done my due diligence like a lot of you have and some of the speakers that come up here. Mine's just casual observation, mostly from being in the city and just observing and talking with people. So I just have something I want to ask about. I've asked about the intersection timing of the light at Tebow and Johnson. And I've got some answers back, so I know we're still waiting on that. I'm just curious, and again, it's after the fact, so it's kind of too late to be asking about it. But there's a card lock station going in on the corner at the co-op. I think that's going to be for trucks, semis with big trailers, I think. Is that correct? Make sure that I've got that right first.
It is a card lock station.
Good.
So we, obviously, it could be for trucks.
Right, for sure. Okay, good. So looking at that, because I walk a lot, and that's why I mentioned the light thing, because I noticed the timing on it was very quick for somebody who might be a bit. Does that belong to somebody?
What's for the next person?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Something here that was, yeah. So as I'm walking, I'm looking at thinking card lock. Wow, that's a busy intersection already. And if trucks are going to be coming in and out of there, I'm not sure how that's going to make that any safer. It's probably not. And I don't know, in communities, I've been in communities where they have truck routes. Trucks are routed a certain direction for safety reasons. They don't want them rambling through town. That's a very busy intersection. Again, I'm not quite sure why that was not looked at as being an already dangerous, busy spot. And I don't know if the city is looking for a route to make that safer for the trucks to exit and enter that spot. But just a suggestion, because if you were to come out from where the trucks will come out once they've gone in for fueling, I'm taking they're coming out on Tebow. I don't think they'll try and get onto the highway. They'll have to come on Tebow, probably turn left to get to the light, turn left to carry on, or turn right. Tebow is across the street from McDonald's. Now to turn left to get back on the highway for a truck with a trailer that's almost as long as the McDonald's lot, not quite, but you get the idea, it takes up a lot of space. There's very little room to turn left onto Tebow to get onto the highway. That's going to create a big problem there. So as an option, trucks could go turn right on Tebow, go to Maple Way, to Cherry Creek, and then turn left. You've got a lot longer section for them to turn left to get back onto the highway and then do the right or left turn at the intersection of Cherry Creek. So it could be, if that's going to be the case for safety and also for trucks, a small turning area to get back onto the highway, maybe recommend a truck route, Maple Way, Cherry Creek, back onto the highway. Just a thought. That's just an observation from walking, so put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Mike, did you want to provide any input?
Sure, I can. Any of developments on the side of Johnson, that's ministry jurisdiction. And the ministry looks at stacking and how vehicle traffic will enter or exit. The rest of the developments, our planning department does research, sometimes asks for engineer design, et cetera, on those types of designs. As far as the traffic master plan, we'll look at a truck route, or possible truck routes, and then we'll deliberate on it, and council can make a decision at that time.
Just a second, this is a question, I can leave it till the end. Being that's a card lock station there, there was a green space kind of between that and which was a motel at one time. Now I think it's the Colson Group uses that for employees. There used to be a bit of a green space, a buffer between buildings, and now there's not. Is that because it was a motel? Is there something that sort of says there has to be a buffer between that sort of thing and something that's kind of residential, commercial with the motel and stuff that's there? Just curious, because I see there was green. I'm just looking at an old map, of course, and it shows a big green space, which is not there anymore.
Thank you. I'll get our Director of Development Services.
So that was, even though there might have been green space in there, it's always been private property. It's a strata lot, developed a number of parcels there. So there will be, as part of the new car lot station, and it's not just large trucks, it's all kind of commercial vehicles can go there. There will be a landscaping plan put there, but there was never a designated green space. It was always private property. It just was, a lot of it was undeveloped and left the way it had been previously. But the ministry did look at this project as part of the development approval process that we went through. And we required truck turning radiuses to be proven out and a variety of different things.
Thank you. Any other members of the public who would like to provide input today? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to delegations. And this is an opportunity for extended periods of presentations and conversations. So come on forward. Rove, we are looking forward to hearing from you. And Sarah will just pull up your presentation.
Hi, it's me again. Yeah, thanks for the extra time, because that's what I was planning for. I made a PowerPoint presentation so I don't have to stand up here and think too much, I guess. But we are Riders of the Alberni Valley, or ROVE, and I'm here to, I guess, tell you why and ask you for support as to helping promote the Alberni Valley be more of an outdoorsy recreational community. Because right now we have great trails, but most of them are illegal and trespassing. So we're trying to legitimize those. And so on your pamphlets, you have mountain bikers I've seen. And now we'll be able to say what trails they're on, because it'll be legitimized, hopefully. We are working with the ACRD. Sorry, that's kind of coming. So we are ROVE. Help, help.
Brand new and tested earlier today.
I swear it was tested. Yeah, who am I pointing to, maybe?
So it is.
Yeah, I'm a mountain biker. I don't do technology except on bikes. Yeah, sorry.
I think we have like a curse in this room.
Well, we did actually discover testing that teams have to be very, very specific in how to share.
Thank goodness for technology people. Thank you, sir. All right, here we go. Oh, there we go. Who are we? We are Riders of the Alberni Valley. We're a nonprofit society. Our goal is to promote recreational cycling in the Alberni Valley through repairing, maintaining, and eventually building trails primarily for cycling, but also for multi-use foot traffic, whether it be running, hiking, or walking. I threw that in there because on the Fur Baby network of trails, sort of the Fur Baby area, there's quite a bit of damage from one or two horses. So that's why I sort of added that in there. Oh. Oh, there we go. Thank you. I'll hide this. Our overall, so I'll start with the overall goals and then work to how you can potentially help us. Our goals overall are to Promote cycling and outdoor recreation by being stewards of the trails in the Alberni Valley. And maintaining them to Whistler Trails standards, which is world-renowned, and International Mountain Biking Association standards, which Rove is a club member. And this is all set out by Recreational Sites and Trails BC, which is Crown land, and that's what we're going to get to be talking about eventually with the Fur Baby Network trails. The 2 to 3 year timeline, so like I said, we'll start broad and then get a little bit more specific. But we want to establish Rove as a trusted stewards of trails in the Alberni Valley and just trustworthy in general. And then apply eventually to Mosaic for permanent trail and land use agreements at the candy store with that network up there, because that is the primary mountain biking area in town. And the beauty of Port Alberni is all these trail networks are like right outside your back door or like 5 minutes away at the candy store. Whereas most towns, you gotta, pack up your car and get there. But me and my friends, we like to ride to the trails we ride on. Our goals, this is a wordy one, sorry. 1 or 2 years away. We're asking you to work with the ACRD to apply for Crown lands for a Section 56 or 7, which is specific to trails. And we as Rove applied for that and got turned down because we are a fairly new club and we're not established. And they've had troubles in the past with clubs being really excited when somebody's at the helm, getting trails, maintaining them, being great trails, and then the person moves away and it sort of falls apart. So it was recommended to us by the Crown Lands and Rec Sites and Trails person to have the city and or ACRD apply to manage the trails and then have us be stewards of it, because obviously you're going to be around forever and ever, and so is the ACRD. More short-term goals, we have applied. Oh, can you go back a slide? Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I'm making stuff up as I go. That was the point of these slides. I wasn't supposed to. While hopefully the city and the ACRD can get along and figure out who is going to apply for these things and have us be stewards and take care of these trails for you with obviously a written agreement in place, we are planning on applying for day licenses to Mosaic so we can host races legally. And be able to promote them outside the valley and not just have, you sort of got to know somebody to ride the trails around here. And I think that will help get Port Alberni back on the map as a mountain biking destination, because it really used to be when I think it was Timber West or Island Timberlands who controlled the candy store and were a little more liberal, giving out licenses to hold races up there. And Port Alberni was a big deal back in the day for mountain biking when that happened. So we're planning on sort of trying to get Port Alberni back on the map this summer by holding races. And one thing that I'm really excited about, because I'm old, so I don't do this stuff where the tires leave the ground as much. So gravel riding, and I was talking to Jolene Dick at Alberni Tourism. And she said that they're in charge of McLean Mill now. So one of my ideas after talking to her was to get a 12 hours of McLean's Mill. Yeah, have like a whole event there with tents and 12 hours, and we do some daylight, some darkness, just to mix it up a bit in the summer. And I think that'd be pretty neat. And I've talked to some people who ride, and they agree that it'd be pretty top notch to do something like that around here. Thank you. Next slide. And even more immediately, in the next couple months, we have an application in with the city to fix these bridges and structures that you can see that are essentially a liability to the city. Through our application with Crown Land and GPSing and talking to different people, some of them in the city, some of them in the ACRD, some of them Crown Lands, it has been agreed upon that these bridges are on city property now. So we have an application in currently to become stewards of the city-owned portion of this very specific Fur Baby Trail to fix this nonsense so nobody gets hurt. And we have been, again, working with Whistler Trail Standards and International Mountain Bike Association standards, along with the Crown Lands. So this is what we're hoping for most immediately from you, is to approve that kind of stuff. How can we benefit you? Well, take away the liability, I guess, from the last slide. Can you go back a slide? Thank you. We can benefit the city by mitigating potential liability situations and replacing and repairing bridges. Like, this is one of the better ones, and it's still got broken rungs on it. With an agreement, if it happens for us, between us and you, Rove could start work immediately. We're all ready to go. We've got over 100 members signed up for our club within the last year. We started just over a year ago with our first AGM of this carnation. Rove has been around for a while, but there were some issues with the other groups. So we're trying to get everything together, get some communication involved. Precedence has been set with agreements in other communities, North Cowichan and the Cowichan Stewardship Society, along with the Quathit Regional District and the Quathit Regional Cycling Association. And there are lots of others agreements out there between regions, cities, and clubs like ourselves. This is the part of the nightmare map that the province was nice enough and went above and beyond and made for us with our help. But you guys can also benefit from a partnership with Rove and the regional district to apply for that Section 57 to manage the entire Fur Baby Network trail. Trail network. And I just kind of call it the Fur Baby Trail Network just because that was the original. And there have been a whole bunch of other trails built just by people wanting trails. And again, we want to legitimize it, have it all under one umbrella, go through the right channels to build and maintain and all that kind of stuff. Oh, your map. I was on a Facebook campaign of getting people to pin your Parks and Recreation interactive map. And I even saw a copy out in the lobby as I was waiting. And not that cyclists are competitive, but we definitely win. We've got the most pins of anybody in the city by like 2 to 3 times, I think. And the explanations behind the pins, I was going through some of them, and they will definitely tell the story on the next couple of slides. And if you can see the background, if you can see the background pictures, I took them from pictures that people actually posted with their comments. So this one, I'm kind of blind, sorry, I can't. Is this the dog? I think people walking their dogs. The trail network is incredible and would be a shame if they were removed. I'm a hospital worker, and part of the reason I have stayed in this community were the trail networks. I will likely leave if they were removed. Like, there's one for hitting home, hospital workers. And I guess along those lines, we have worked with doctors at the hospital who are keen on getting these trails legitimized as a sales pitch to get hospital workers in town and doctors. Another comment, one of the reasons I moved to Port Alberni was to access the great mountain bike trails like these. I use them regularly for biking and walking my dog. And that's maybe, I think, the picture that I stole. I either walk my dog, run, or mountain bike on these trails daily. I'm not exaggerating, probably 300 out of the last 365 days I've gone on these trails. I'd like to see them kept green. Do I have to read these?
I'll just, no, it's okay. You can if you want to, but I'll just let you know we have about 2 minutes left, and then we have time for question and answers. So.
Okay. Well, read them real quick. Skip to the next slide. You guys can read much faster than I can. Even more from the interactive map. There we go. Summary of my presentation. With the City of Port Alberni's help, support for an agreement to replace and repair the bridges and structures on the city portion of Fur Baby Trail. So that's the number one goal that will hopefully happen within weeks, but I tend to be a little overzealous with my enthusiasm. So it'll probably be a couple of months. And then working with the ACRD, I've had meetings with them, and I'm on their Parks and Recreation Steering Committee that they have. I can't remember the exact wording of it. And they said, that it is a possibility that they will apply. So I'm hoping you guys work together to make that happen, because Fur Baby, well, at least the lower portion is definitely on your property, depending on what map you believe. The whole of Fur Baby is on city land, so we'll have to figure that out. But I hear the city just got a GPS person, so that's fun. But I hear it's also a while before they get 2 trails. Sorry, where was I? Rove can help the entire Alberni Valley become more active, healthy, and connected to nature and local culture through repairing, maintaining, building trails for multi-use. But we will come at it through a cycling focus, but we don't mind sharing. Safety obviously will be a top priority with the guidelines that I've told you before. With the expansion of a legitimized trail network in the region, Rove can help put this beautiful area on the adventure tourism map, with finally being able to advertise and promote outdoor, a variety of trails for recreational opportunities, including cycling, running, events, which will be super fun for us, and races. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for coming today and for the presentation, but mostly I think thank you for the work that your group is doing in organizing and the offer to help maintain our incredible trails. I will say that this council puts a very high importance on trails, and we have been really working to try to expand our outdoor recreational assets over the last few years, but we recognize that we can't do all of that on our own. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how this goes as we work to see, what a user agreement would look like. But yeah, very excited to hear. I mean, some of those bridges, I think I recognize those from my daily walks as well. I was like, oh, that little, like that one I know for sure where that one is. So yeah, I mean, I think there's no doubt these areas need improvement, and some of them are just small trails that you don't probably know where they are unless you just happen to find them. So I think that not only do they need to be improved, we also could benefit a lot as a valley to be promoting them. They're incredible assets, and we're certainly very proud of them, but they need some work done. Mike, could you maybe just help council understand where this is at in terms of like coming to council, or would this be an administrative agreement? I would imagine it would need council direction, but since we don't have it in front of us yet, just an overview would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks for the question. My understanding is it's currently working between Rove and our parks manager. So the Parks, Rec and Culture Department will bring forward that agreement as soon as it's ready to execute.
Awesome. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad you mentioned the attraction, using trails to attract medical personnel, because I was actually at a meeting with that group of doctors, and that's exactly what they said. They're using our outdoor environment in order to attract people to our community, so that's fantastic. Thank you.
Was it Dr. Lambiot?
Yes, always.
We got him, yeah. Yeah, he's very excited to have this happen. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great. It's great to see, yeah.
Yeah, we're so lucky to have him in our
Yeah,
community.
and he's brought up, money, the money aspect too, once we get established and get things going, and because it all takes money, obviously, and
Yeah, yeah.
and,
And
so
you
we're
said
trying
you've-
to take the burden away from you guys as much as we can. So
And you said you've talked to the ACRD through the Parks and Trail Committee. What I'll do is I'll take this to Jenny. I can't remember what her official title is, and see what she needs from the city for support, whether it's just a letter of support or what she needs from us, and maybe we can get that going for you as well. Or offer our help and support anyway.
right, that'd be great. Yeah, I've been talking with Michael McGregor.
Bill McGregor, yeah.
Yeah.
I could talk to him as well.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah, we've
talk to
been
both.
having great chats with Michael. Yeah, for quite a while actually. Yeah.
Awesome. Any other comments from council? Councillor Solda.
Just a quick question. How many, you said there's about approximately, 100 members. Is there a lot more than that? Or how many members is in the Port Alberni branch or all over NBC?
No, we're just talking Rove from Port Alberni, so Riders of Alberni Valley. And we just got started a year ago. We had our annual general meeting a year ago, so it's about time we have another one in January. And since then, we have 100 members locally. Yeah, which is a pretty good number for little old Port Alberni, especially because lots of people are jaded. I'm thinking most of the people of that 100 are newer to town. And once we start getting results and people start seeing things that we have done, I think we'll get a lot more sort of the old-time locals on board. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight, and we will wait on next steps from staff and then look forward to moving forward.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, council, moving on to unfinished business. Item number 1 is fire department first responder service levels.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, so before you is a report for fire department first responder service levels. This came about, as you know, and has been reported. We've had increasing call volumes generally, and an increasing percentage of those call volumes as a result of the first responder program. There was some engagement, as I understand, between council staff at UBCM, and that resulted in a meeting between myself and Mr. Elzinga, who's on the call here today. What that conversation was about was engaging with the subject matter expert in pre-hospital care, which is BCEHS, and trying to understand what the implications would be if we were to reduce our level of service as it pertains to the first responder program. From those conversations came the letter that's attached to your report, and the recommendations of administration are in line with the recommendations out of that report. Again, on the line with us here today is Don Elzinga, who's the Senior Provincial Executive Director with BCEHS. And he's here to provide a bit more context on any questions that you might have with regards to what the impacts might be should there be a reduction in service levels.
Thank you. Questions, comments, council? Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. From our last conversation when this came to council, I seem to remember there was another community on the island who is using this lower level of service for calls for their fire department, but I can't remember where that was. I'm thinking it was like Saanich or Colwood or somewhere, but I'm not exactly sure. But if you know of that community, do you know if what has been their reaction by the community? Has there been any negative effects by incorporating this policy?
Great question. I'll grab that one. It is Machosen. It was the community that decided to respond to all calls. A very rural type of community with a lot of elderly, and they're wanting to assist a lot of property as far as acreages, animals, etc. And so they wanted to look at it more of a community support sort of aspect. As far as the pilot project of having them and our post review, it's hard to say for them on how well it's going. For a financial perspective as well. But for us, it's been very helpful for all fire departments to attend with BCHS across this province, and certainly want to thank Chief Owens and his team for the work that's done in the Port Alberni Valley. We are who we are because of our fire departments and first responders. We have changed a lot of the ways we do business in this province. In the past, in the history, I've been with BCHS for 35 years. We were working with fire departments only to go on high-level medical calls. Over this past 2-year period, we've been working with the ministry and the Fire Chiefs Association of BC to really open up our minds and look at communities to have them determine what they want to respond to. So as Machosen chose to go on the lower acuities, we're leaving that to communities to decide across the province. We created a first responder service agreement with the ministry and the Fire Chiefs Association, signed off in August, and we're starting to go around the province to work with communities on that first responder agreement and allowing them again to choose telling us what they want to go on, how we can help support, and how we can be a team together.
Councillor Haggard.
And one more question. Say if I call 911 and I think I need support, and at that time it's not an emergency, but so I'm on a lower call list waiting for the paramedics to come, but then things change with my condition. Do you tell them that if my condition worsens, I can phone back and get quicker assistance, or is that up to me to call, or how is that communicated?
Every 911 call, every caller is told if anything changes to call us back for worse or for better. If things start to get better, we would reassess the call. We do actually do callbacks if calls are waiting too long to make sure the patient's condition hasn't changed. We also introduced something a few years back called secondary triage, where we have clinicians inside our 911 dispatch centers that will review the lower acuity calls to make sure that, again, these patients can wait a bit longer for an ambulance to respond. We are, like Chief Owen said, our responses across this province have grown dramatically. Our reds and our purples, which are our high acuity calls, have jumped up in quite high levels. And so we are looking at our own, deployment strategies. In fact, we've just done a meeting this morning with our senior leadership team to create a strategic deployment. I'm representing the first responders and fire departments with that strategic deployment committee, because we have to look at a different way of doing business. And our dispatch centers is one of them, with the virtual assistance of doctors and paramedic specialists within those centers that can work through. We're actually starting to take patients to urgent care centers to keep them free of emergency departments. In 2023, I believe 22% of all of our 911 calls were non-conveyance, so we did not transport at all. We have a high level of calls coming into our 911 center, and that is why, again, the need to change and the way we do business. It used to be BC ambulance and fire departments were for emergencies, and now we're finding with lack of physicians across the province that we're being called more often, and again, really needing to recreate where we are in this province as far as medical help.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I have just a quick question, and I'm not sure if it's the chief will need to answer it or not, but, or can answer that. When we send out firefighters to respond to a call, and it's not well, it's always an emergency, but it's not a fire, do we send out we used to have a truck or some kind of other vehicle than the fire truck? Do we still use that?
Yeah, so in previous years, we used to deploy a light rescue vehicle. So we would split the crew. So the crew of 4 would then become a crew of 2. And now recalling that this was set up at a time when our call volume was quite a bit lower than it is today. And so on occasion, you would end up having a second call that would come in, and the engine with the captain and another firefighter would take the second apparatus and respond to the second medical call or whatever that second call might have been. What we're finding now is that the call volume has increased to a point where we're consistently having stacked calls. And if we still maintain that split between the two apparatus, we would, on a consistent basis, have 2 trucks in 2 separate places with a patient and 2 fire service personnel. And so then when another call comes in, whether it be a structure fire, a motor vehicle accident, et cetera, what would happen is depending on if BCHS was on scene or not, if they're not on scene, then we can't leave the patient. And so then what you have is 2 different apparatus being driven by 1 fire department personnel each, leaving 1 firefighter at each one of the other properties where the medical call was taking place, and really responding in an ineffective way in terms of there's not many call types outside of medical calls where those 2 firefighters are going to be effective on scene, let alone the fact that now we've left 2 people on their own in whatever the property was that had that medical call. So it made a lot of sense, and it worked for us when our call volume was sitting around 1,200 a year with a 50% call volume that was dedicated to first responders. Now that we're sitting, knocking on 3,000 store, we'll probably do 2,800 to 2,900 calls this year, with the percentage of medical calls now being more around, 67 to 70%. We'll see where we end up in the year. It just no longer makes sense to always be splitting our crews in that manner that used to work in the past.
I just remember there was a lot of kickback when we went to that, to a smaller vehicle. And I'm just looking at cost, like do you have to have overtime staff called in, is it what you're referring to, what you were alluding to is cost efficient? Is it cost efficient for the fire department? Or would it be better to go back to the way it used to, with a smaller vehicle?
Yeah, so how our system is currently set up, we don't typically do call-outs. So we don't do call-outs for medical calls. So if the call comes in as a medical call, a second medical call comes in, it gets stacked in behind the first one. And so there are some fire departments in the province that do callbacks for each call that they do. We're not one of them. So from a cost perspective, I don't think that there's much of a change. The times that we're calling out additional crews is when we have a structure fire where we're already calling everybody out anyway. Perhaps if we had a motor vehicle accident that was outside of town where we're also calling a crew back anyway. So we're not, going back, I guess, to the regular council meeting today, we'll certainly come forward with a breakdown of where we're seeing those overtime costs, so you can actually see what the numbers are. But just sitting here today, I can tell you that it isn't so much about an increase in costs. There is a level of service decrease that's already happened because we used to go to 2 medical calls simultaneously, and now we're only going to one medical call at a time and stacking the next one behind it, which is how we preserve our level of service to a degree for all of the other call types that come in.
I guess what I'm looking at too is that when you get a stand down, you know, you're going off and you're into responding to a call and the fire truck's going and then you're standing down, that's wear and tear on the vehicle. So that's what I'm also looking at, because by the time when you come back, when the fire department comes back and, you know, we have this many hours on a fire truck and we need to replace it, it's just some of those runs. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, so.
Yeah, certainly there is a wear and tear factor that comes in, and there's repairs that certainly need to take place. Presently, we replace our apparatus based on years, not based on hours or any other metric. We haven't gotten to a place where, although certainly the number of kilometers that we put on our frontline engine is increasing, in part due to the increased call volume, also the duties that the fire department has taken on has increased over the years. We're doing a lot more company inspections, going down and making assessments of confined space, rope rescue situations, things like that. So the kilometers are certainly going up. That is wear and tear. That does mean replacement on tires and brakes and all of those things. But in terms of the large capital purchase, we haven't got to a place where we've been replacing a frontline apparatus as a result of that increased wear.
And one last thing regarding getting calls out to Bamfield, because we do go to Bamfield and outside our area, which would be regional district. So why is not Beaver Creek or the regional district looking after their areas instead of Port Alberni? And I know about we go in and assist in that, but it's still wear and tear. And do we charge out? And how does that work?
Yeah, so that's done through the road rescue program, which is through emergency management and climate readiness, the ministry. And so on those call types, we're not doing that on behalf of the regional district. We're doing those on behalf of the province. And I would say that the vast majority of square kilometers that we cover with that road rescue program are not in anybody's fire protection area. So we meet up with Uculet at about the zip line, but there's, I don't know the exact number of kilometers, but there's many kilometers between the zip line and their fire protection boundary as well. Bamfield doesn't have the tools or capability or training to administer road rescue, which is why we go all the way to and actually into Bamfield. And then we meet Coombs in Cathedral Grove, and same thing. Cathedral Grove is beyond Coombs' fire protection boundary as well. So there's many fire departments that are kind of in the same boat, supporting the province in that way. At a previous committee of the whole, we did bring back a report, and just off the top of my head, I want to say that when looking at wages, in terms of overtime costs, and then what we were able to receive from EMCR, I think we're about $8,000 ahead, but that doesn't include things like wear and tear and things like that, right? So while we might be ahead on wages, probably the all sunk in cost is not the same.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. Just one more question. This is for you, Dawn. Even though we're going only to the red and purple calls, the number of medical calls of our fire department has increased significantly. And I know that we're not the only ones in the province with this issue, but on our agenda tonight is to hire 2 more firefighters and a couple more, in future years to try and keep up with these calls. Our firefighters are suffering from compassion fatigue. So we have to help the firefighters in some way, otherwise they're not going to be here any longer. Their mental and physical health is suffering as well. So just hypothetically, I'm not saying we're going to do this, we haven't talked about it, but What can we do to spur the province on to hiring more paramedics for our area? Do we say we're not going to go on any more medical calls? Because firefighters were intended to be a support system, not one of the primary systems for people who need assistance.
Well, that's a great question. And hypothetically, I'll give you an answer. We also are having a challenge with, as you would be well aware of, burnout fatigue for our paramedics across this province. We have done a mass hiring in the last 2 years alone. We have over 327 communities in our province that are more than 30 minutes away from an ambulance station, communities like Howsett and others that we're constantly looking how we can better improve our services. Again, you're looking at things like virtual, the clinical hub, looking at ideas. Chief Owens talked about being stuck on scene sometimes, looking at abilities for fire departments to call in through our clinical hub to speak to physicians, to be able to be released from those patients so they can go do the calls that they need to attend. I will take up any offer to advocate. As we all know that Minister Osborne is new to her role as well. Our funding comes directly through the Ministry of Health, whether it's through the first responders, whether it's through BCHS, I'll be at the table with you advocating for more help across this province because it's needed everywhere. If you were to stop responding to calls, there are communities that have across this province. There's communities that have done it last month. There's communities that have done it last year. And then there's communities that have done it and now are going back to responding to purple and red calls where they had stopped going for some time. So again, the challenge that I have at BCHS is that I have to make sure that the communities are aware of it's their choice. We're not going to say what you must go on or what you need to go on, but we applaud and work with each community to make sure we can support their firefighters and again address those fatigue issues because it is very challenging. And again, my extreme thanks for Chief Owen's team for what they do on a daily basis.
Let's go knock on Minister Osborne's door together.
I'm with you. Let's go.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Patola, I'm hoping I can get a really clear answer on what calls we would not be going to should this proceed. Because I know there's technical language in this report, but it doesn't really tell me like who's going to be left at home without medical care waiting.
Yeah, so because I'm the author of the report, I'll tell you what it says, and then Dawn can perhaps chime in as the subject matter expert to tell you what it means. So presently, right now, we go to purples and reds, and then if we're requested because of a delay, we'll go to lower acuity calls. So what this report says is that we will no longer go to those lower acuity calls unless there's a situation where BCHS staff who are on scene require additional help. So that's access help, and that came out of, and Mr. Elzinga can probably speak to this better than I, that came out of an inquest where there was somebody that was behind a locked door that BCHS was delayed getting to and didn't have a favorable outcome. And so that's where that was added to our call types across the province, to my knowledge. And then lift assist, where the person is just, that the crew on scene can't do the lift by themselves. And so for safety reasons, they request us to come and assist. So we would still do those, but we would no longer do delay calls. So in those cases, it would be that there would be callbacks that would be happening. Callbacks, sorry, when I say callbacks, I should be clear on that. That's calls from BCHS dispatch by the patient saying that, their situation has gotten worse and that they need to upgrade to a red. But maybe in terms of the color codes themselves, I'll pass it over to Mr. Elzinga, who can maybe give some
Yeah.
examples.
I'm hoping to know what type of medical incidents are we talking about here? Because I think it's all well and good for us to talk about like colors and numbers and recognize that we're providing a service that realistically should not be provided by the municipality. But I think we need to fully understand what people are going to be at home without medical care if we proceed with this.
I'll try and give you the best examples I can. There's such wide categories of colors. So we'll start with our purples. So purples are immediate life-threatening calls, which require basically an immediate intervention. So our chokings, our really ineffective breathing, our cardiac arrests, our hangings, those type of things where we need to be there immediately. Our reds, when we start going down the categories, when we answer a 911 call, we answer questions of are they conscious, are they breathing? We'll get, actually, if you believe it or not, we'll get one of 32 possible responses, all the way from animal bites, abdominal pain, back pain, chest pain, seizures, all the way down the whole gamut. And out of those 32 cards, there's different determinants. So there's purples, there's reds. Reds are the next one where patients maybe not quite alert, or chest pain with a cardiac history. And they're borderlining on life-threatening calls that we need to attend to. And again, oxygen and whether or not we're going to need an AED when we get there, really it's fairly a critical call for us. Then we start dropping into our calls. Oranges, yellows, greens, and blues are the next category of calls. So oranges are a call where it may be that real, whether it's a stable patient but needs to get to the hospital quickly, something like a stroke that the person's awake, they're conscious, they're breathing, those type of things. There's different categories based on a person's age. If they have chest pain and they're under 35 years of age, or if they're chest pain and over 35 years of age, again, if they're fully alert and they're breathing fine, it might fall into that orange category. And then there's really a bucket of what we call stable patients, or yellow. Yellow is the next category that most fire departments across this province do not go on to. There are routine without lights and sirens. There are falls, or broken legs, or where time in some cases may make a difference, but realistically, it's something where a 6-hour time frame to get to a hospital is in a normal category for that. Our greens come into things like appointments and very stable patients. And then our blues are discharges home, going back, et cetera, which the fire departments, again, other than Metchosin and a few others, do not attend to. So it's really that category of oranges, and then definitely the reds and purples, which we look to our partners in the fire departments to assist with. Because again, getting someone to the scene as quick as we can is certainly beneficial to our community residents across this province. Orange is one, and the delayed response. Again, as asked previously, we will tell everyone to call us back if things changes. Depending on the category of the patient, the 911 caller may stay on the phone with the patient to determine if there changes while we're waiting for an ambulance or fire to arrive. So we do have the opportunity to upgrade calls and/or downgrade calls where required. For example, a choking may come in that they are choking, but they're breathing effectively. They're just having troubles. They're coughing, and then they cough it up while we're on the phone. And whether they now cancel us or still want to be checked out because of a sore throat, we can downgrade that call. And as well, we can cancel the fire department depending on how that call came in originally. So the colors, blue, green, yellow, orange, red, and purple, with the red and purple being the very serious calls.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just picking up on that, because the classification system varies with calls, and that was an excellent description of it, but I'm wondering if there are training manuals for dispatchers, or any better written determinants of the classification system, so that we could actually understand what it is, as opposed to specific examples, but we could actually look at the system and see how individuals move through the classification system, and we can then determine more accurately which calls we do or do not want to attend.
No, very fair question. We actually use what's called MPDS, or the Medical Priority Dispatch System. It's used world-renowned system. Australia, London. It was actually developed by Dr. Jeff Clausen in the United States. That's why, again, back in my day, a long time ago, 30 some odd years ago, as a dispatcher, it was actually a card set, a manual card set, before we were even on computers, where you would flip through the cards. Again, all assessed by a physician-based program. So we actually have a doctor that looks at what we call our CRM, our crew response model, on a monthly basis. They actually look at the calls to make sure patient outcome, based on what they were assessed at that acuity level, is in line with where they sit, and whether calls such as a seizure card, which we recently upgraded to a lights and siren call, was marked stable across the world as far as the system goes. But we had our own ability to assess those, pull in the data, look at hundreds of calls that fall into that category, and then move it into the appropriate call, which is usually up one or down one, depending on the response. For example, a 29 Delta 2, an MVA with a rollover, we had thousands of responses with rollovers. 20 years ago, they were very, very serious patients. Today's world, with the airbags and the way that cars are built today, our rollovers aren't as high impact as they used to be. So they still require lights and sirens, but they're not needing our full critical care team, which they did 20 years ago. So again, we evaluate all of these responses as we go. So Medical Priority Dispatch System, MPDS, you can certainly look that up, and I can certainly send you literature on that. Our call takers have to go through, it's roughly about a 4-month program, after pre-qualifying through certain levels of first aid, et cetera, to become a EMCT, emergency medical call taker, and then some of them move on to emergency medical dispatcher from there. It used to be one program that was close to a year long, and it's been broken up into 2 programs now.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
Thank you. I'll certainly look into that. Now, obviously, the ambulance or EHS needs to change its way of doing business, and you're probably subject to some budgetary restraint yourself. You mentioned there's a first responder agreement that's being explored. I wonder if that agreement at all provides for funding or cost recovery to the fire departments that are attending calls on behalf of EHS.
I think that you and I both wish that there was funding with it. Unfortunately, not. Unfortunately, so 2019, the Auditor General report, and that's something that can be looked at as well. It's a public document for access to pre-hospital care. 2019, the Auditor General came up with recommendations of what BCHS needs to be able to do with pre-hospital care. And part of that was to work with our fire department and first responders better across this province. In fact, we struck up a pre-hospital care committee, which I'm a tri-chair of, and also Dan Derby, who's the president of the Fire Chiefs Association, is the other tri-chair member, and Eugene Johnson is the third tri-chair member. So the Ministry, Fire, and BCHS are represented at this Auditor General's meeting, where we're working hard to look at all ideas. In fact, I met with Dan and team today, and I'm meeting with the OE Auditor General's Working Group tomorrow, and then the Pre-Hospital Care Committee on Thursday, to talk about the challenges that are across this entire province, including funding, and how we can again work better. Again, whether that's the clinical hub, whether that's having our partnership data collection with our fire department, so we can understand this province better of how the calls are coming in and who's doing the work, and so certainly looking at all aspects. Data recovery was one of the reports. The first responder service agreement was the other one, that we need to have a solid agreement where we partner, and again, part of that is the operational response plan within the service agreement, which the fire departments can determine and the cities can determine on what they want to respond to in the operational response plan. And I know you talked about Banfield. They can also lay out their geographical boundaries in this the first responder service agreement, or what we call FRSA, really set where they respond to, what they respond to, if it's MVAs, if it's hazmat, if it's over the bank rescue, really breaking down every community across this province.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm going somewhere with this. We're under a budgetary restraint. You're under a budgetary restraint. You're trying to find new ways of doing business. We are trying to find new ways of doing business. And from my perspective, I can't speak for all of council, but the priority needs to be first and foremost on keeping the service that we're providing healthy. So if we cannot man, woman, person, equip a apparatus, then we don't have a fire suppression system. And that's why we have a fire department. So whatever the new way of doing business is, it can't undermine those primary responsibilities, in my opinion. Now, obviously, it was a rhetorical question. There is no budget for the EHS to pay fire departments. But if the EHS did have to pay fire departments, how would that affect your reliance on fire departments to do all of these secondary and tertiary services?
That's, again, a very, very good question. I think Chief Owens and I talked about this today, and we've talked about this a lot. I think BCHS, and I'll again give kudos to my own team, is very good at what we do for our purple and red calls for interventions across this province. Where there's going to be challenges is our low acuity calls. It's the people that are needing to move from Port Alberni to Nanaimo, our cardiac patients that are stable, our interfacility transfers that need to be moved. If fire departments weren't responding, they do in other communities, what tends to happen is, based on our deployment model, we also, like Chief Owens, we keep an apparatus available to respond to our purple and red calls. So they're still going to be managed. They're still going to have patient care. However, we are going to need to be looking at the lower acuity that are waiting to be moved out of the community and not wanting to send an ambulance long distance, from this case, the hour and bit to Nanaimo. We're going to keep them in the community if it's the last ambulance, and wait until we have enough resources to be able to move them before we, so that we can respond again to purples. I think, again, there are times that ambulance gets to the purples first, and there's times that that the fire department gets to those purples. And again, with that team effort, it's certainly a high impact for fire to be there, to be available for those calls. However, BCHS is committed to being there for the sickest of the sick patients as well.
Thank you.
And I hope I'm answering your questions and not.
I think so. I don't want to put my spin on your answers. So, so it's good to know that there are other procedures that could be put into place to ensure that the public stays safe, especially with regards to reds or purples specifically. I am more interested in the low acuity calls where there's an exception placed on them that local fire departments could probably not respond to them, except when the EHS needs assistance in egress or lifting. And I'm wondering if you've done any, EHS, not you personally, has done any investigation of what the value of those services in particular are. Why, I kind of want to know why somebody picked a 4-person team of responders in a $2 million apparatus to respond to a lift assist, and who did the economics on figuring that that was the cheapest way to do it?
Oh, it's a fair point and a fair question. We have, again, communities across the province that won't go to lift assist, are not able to go, or out of their boundaries, out of their catchment areas. We have times where we have to send an ambulance from an hour and a half community further away to be able to do lift assist. We are finding, and probably yourselves, that there are more bariatric patients in today's world than there were 20, 30 years ago for us, just the generalized population itself. And we're finding patients of 400, 500 pounds that there's no way that we would be able to lift that with a two-man crew. So we are looking at, again, how we can get more help to those scenes. We call upon other agencies, search and rescue where needed. We call upon whoever we can to help. We've called local snowplows to follow us to hospitals to clear the path for us. So we look to all our partners across this province, but we will work with every municipality to see how we can work together. But it is a fair question.
Thank you. Councillor Patola.
And so some ideas that may seem way out of nowhere, out of left field, and you won't have any pricing for this, but I'm just going to throw these out there and see if you have any comments with regards to their viability or as alternatives. So instead of having to respond with ambulances to heart attacks, would it not be cheaper to simply station AEDs publicly available within 1 block radiuses and give free CPR training to residents of that neighborhood and essentially get back to the public helping public issue instead of having to, or solution, instead of having to pay people to do what we would otherwise do for our neighbor anyways?
Thank you, Councillor Patola. I'm not sure if that was a real question or not.
So the question is the viability of stationing AEDs
Sure.
and CPR training.
I appreciate that. I want to be respectful of everyone's time here. We have a long agenda ahead of us. So we're talking about orange calls, purple calls, red calls, not restructuring the entire BCEHS system that is outside of our control. So let's try as much as possible to stick to what is within our control, our fire department, and what they're responding to.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am. And so I would repeat the same question, because we have to find new ways of doing business. And if the way of doing business is to send an ambulance an hour and a half, that happens to be an hour and a half away, to respond to, I'm having chest pain, a much cheaper and much more effective response is to use the AED that's 500 feet away, because that's what AEDs are designed for. So I'm a little offended that using technology is something that you think is outside of the fire department and or the EHS. I'm not planning for the EHS, but I'm planning to not have our fire department paid to do things that are provincial responsibilities, and looking to find solutions that are available, readily available, that will solve the problem and provide a higher level of care. So I'm asking individuals that know more about this than I do as to whether or not it's a ridiculous idea to put AEDs out in public for use. The city seems to be doing that already, but if we had a greater distribution of them, would that assist in some of those calls?
Comments from council? Other questions? I think it's not unreasonable to say this is not an opportunity to revamp the BCEHS. Appreciate your long line of questioning. Today, we're talking about what level of calls the Port Alberni Fire Department is going to respond to. We have a long agenda ahead of us. We have the pleasure of this guest. We've had additional meetings as well, and I think we all recognize that there are significant issues within the system that need to be addressed. We are not going to solve them all tonight. Are there other questions from council? Go ahead if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, very simply, I can tell you that Councillor Patola has probably been reading my emails. We have actually a a pilot project underway called Neighbor Saving Neighbors, where 4 communities right now are looking at adding 200 plus AEDs to their communities. We are going to be looking at if that pilot project works. It's something put on by Doctors of BC, as well as a company from back east, and seeing how we can expand that to the rest of the province. So it is, again, one of many, many, many ideas that BCHS is working on. So it is something we are looking at seriously, and hopefully, again, will help save some of the need. But again, if you're needing an AED, you're probably going to be needing transport to a hospital, and probably that still would cause the fire and ambulance response at that same time, regardless of who's bringing the AED to the patient.
Thank you. And as I understand, we are not discussing not going to red calls or purple calls. So we have the BCHS as well as the City of Port Alberni Fire Department who would be attending those calls. Councillor Mealy, did you have a comment? Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Elzinga. Thank you very much, Chief. And definitely thank you to Councilor Patola for his questions. But I just move that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council direct administration to reduce the medical first responder level of service to only respond to calls coded red or purple, or where British Columbia Emergency Health Services, BCEHS, requires assistance with rescue, access, or lifting a patient.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Mealy, seconded by Councillor Haggard. Comments? Councillor Mealy.
No, just wanted to thank our guests for being here today. Thank you, Chief, again. And it has been a good discussion. It has been a good discussion.
Thank you. Before we vote, I would just like to express, I think, a general concern with reducing the level of calls that our fire department is going to. While I also do not want to be funding a service that, I think we accept the province should be funding, and they are, so let's not mischaracterize that. I think we all wish there was more funding from BCEHS. That said, we are very fortunate to have a full-time professional fire department in our community. We have that resource. I do not want to leave people at home without medical care. I'm not convinced, based on the description of the orange calls, that those are not calls that I would like to see our fire department at if BCEHS cannot get to them. So I think that we have sometimes a challenge to need to push, because we do need to push the province. However, I think that in our push of the province and requesting, always better resourcing for our community, I'm not sure I want to leave our community members at home without medical care in the middle of our push with the province. So appreciate the conversation that we've had. I think I personally cannot support this motion for that reason. It's not to say that I don't think we ever need to go there, but I think with the call volumes that we have and recognizing that this is not a large number of call volumes, I would personally like to see us continue to go to these calls until we can't anymore. And if we can't, we can't. Maybe it's a future change. If we do proceed with this and appreciate whatever direction council wants to go, then I would like to see us evaluate it in a few months and see how many calls have been missed, what was the severity of those calls. I think that we have sort of been put in a position of a challenging space where, we, like many communities, have asked the province for more resources and in terms of BCEHS. And I think that there's various reasons. This is not just cheapness from the province. I don't think that that's the reality of the situation that we're facing. It's a multifaceted situation and challenge. And I don't think that the province is intending to leave us in a position where our fire department needs to subsidize a service. But at the end of the day, if somebody in our community needs medical assistance, then I think we have a resource that can provide it if BCEHS can't. And my personal preference is we keep providing that service and we take this conversation to the province. We let them know that we've considered this. We let them know that we want to continue to be a partner. However, we make a request for additional resources and approach it at least one more time in that way. We do now have our MLA as Minister of Health, and I would love if our relationship with her in that capacity didn't start off combative by saying we're no longer going to these calls because we're mad that we've been subsidizing a service that you should be doing a better job providing. And I know that's not what is suggested here today of how we would phrase that discussion, but I think that we have an additional step before we, in my opinion, come back to this step, which I would say is reasonably drastic. We have a service, and let's use it to keep people safe in our community. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do appreciate that. And I will just note that this is a recommendation to council. This will come at the January meeting as another item, if I'm not mistaken. If there's any additional information or a different direction that council would like to take because of that, we can do it at that time.
Thank you. Councillor Dame and Councillor Haggard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must admit that I am still deeply torn on this issue, which is not ideal when you're about to vote. But as Councillor Mealy has just pointed out, this isn't the final say or the final decision. So I will be supporting the motion, fully aware that it will be brought back and we might have further discussion, and I may very well change my mind. So that's where I'm at, because I do feel like we need to do something. It's many things. We've got to take some action on this. It's not working as it is. It can't. We all know it can't continue to just be the responsibility of the municipality to answer these calls. And yeah, so that's where I'm at. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to vote in favor of the motion, but we'll see where it goes.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. When this first came to council, I wasn't supportive of it because I felt the same way that you do, but we're already not responding to the less urgent calls right now. So we're just putting it into motion, I guess, to make it official. I'm not sure why we're doing this motion if we're already doing that anyway, but I think we need to, and he assured me that if someone gets worse, they will be upgraded. So I don't think that anybody will be hurt by doing this.
Thank you. Any final comments? Okay, seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Just me. Motion carried. Thank you, and that will proceed to council. All right, and on to new business. Item number 1, we have 2025 to 2029 financial plan, next steps, and public engagement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, or Committee today. Sorry. So obviously we've brought forward some discussion points for the financial plan. We've had some discussion, some good discussion today earlier at the regular council meeting, looking at different options as far as focus in the financial plan. So as administration, we thank you for bringing some things forward. We'll bring that information back to you. But this current financial plan reflects the current level of services that we are providing. This is direction that has been set by council over the years, going back to when we started, essentially. These are levels of services that might not be clear, and we've heard that as administration, and we will bring information forward. And I think we brought forward some level of service discussion points as we went through the level of service discussion earlier this year. Obviously, there's more information that's needed there to identify and look at what we need to bring forward. So we'll bring that forward in January so that you'd have that opportunity to understand what you need to do for the financial plan. So I really appreciate that information, that feedback today, and we'll work towards making sure we bring that forward. So with that, some important things that we need to do is set some key performance indicators. I know that it's improvements that we'll see in the financial plan with the level of service. So we look at things a little bit more in detail. I know we consistently had the line items and we talked to the different services that were provided within those line items. We'll see the level of service. Things will be broken down a little bit differently moving forward. And that will provide the detail needed to govern the financial plan and allow council to set the service levels. We do have a challenge, obviously, with 15.63%, and this number will fluctuate. As you've alluded to, Madam Mayor, we've seen some of the costs come in. So we're still refining that. Obviously, our benefit costs still come forward. We're getting those set. WCB rates, everything starts coming in about this time of year. So we're still setting those final numbers for the financial plan. Tonight will be the final opportunity to bring new levels of service to council for 2025 consideration, moving forward into 2026 and forward. Any other additional asks from administration would be brought forward at that time. But when we focus on 2025, you'll have the opportunity to look at 2025 tonight. And, just thinking about the ability for us to track in the financial plan, we're looking at probably a menu. And, we've had a listing of different considerations in the resolutions that were brought forward. If we could quantify those and provide a running tally, like we do with the question and answer, that could provide council with the opportunity to look at where we need to adjust and make change. So I think we can commit that to council and the committee to make some administration changes. So with communications, we see the roadmap that was in the attachment to the report. So it lays out the adoption of the financial plan target at the end of March. But obviously, we have many opportunities to have additional meetings, or we can adjust that timeline if council sees fit. I'd like to thank the manager of communications for setting up the Let's Connect page for the financial plan. We'll see that as the avenue for which we can provide information, follow up on, and then allow the public and council to address any concerns within that page, and that would live throughout the financial planning process. So with that, we're looking at a focus on improvements as far as relatable values in dollars in the financial plan. So rather than just bring forward the percentage, how does that look when we look at changes in a certain service line item, how that will affect the average single-family residential home as far as a change over year. So with that, I hand it back to the committee for any questions that they might have at this time.
Thank you very much. Questions from council? Okay, seeing no questions, would somebody like to move receipt? Moved by Councillor Dame, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments. Okay, comment?
No, just one, Madam Mayor, and then the director doesn't have to be. Just on our agenda package today for everybody at home, there is the roadmap of how we get to the finish. So the next time, and we really want public engagement. This is what the committee of the whole is. This is why we have it at nighttime. So January 14th, 6 o'clock is the next time for department presentations and public engagement. I really hope that we have members of the public, and it can be anybody, but especially new members of the public who have an opportunity in the new year to come and sit down with us, look at the budget over the holiday season, and bring forth their ideas.
Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Thank you. And I would just also like to add that I really appreciate the budget page on the Let's Connect website. I think it's an excellent step towards just a more transparent process and presenting the process in a way that is accessible to everybody. So kudos to staff for that.
Thank you. Thank you. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. All right, item number 2, Fire Department 2025 Capital Financial Plan Implications.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So before you today is a report just outlining some proposed changes to the capital financial plan as it pertains to the fire department. So maybe I'll just go through each line and have a very brief explanation. So the first one is the $50,000 from taxation for a functional study and design to renovate the fire hall to address daily operations, growth, health and safety, gender requirements, and equipment storage. So this has a few different implications to it. There are efficiencies that we can build into the fire department. There's some very practical things, such as at present, if we want to have a confidential conversation and one of the exempt chief officer offices, we need to leave the building because there's no soundproofing in that building. So things like that. But the biggest one for me is that as we've come to learn more and more about the carcinogens that are associated with the job, we've come to learn that there are steps that we can take in the design of the building in order to prevent carcinogens or mitigate the effects of carcinogens. And so some of that is just establishing, a green zone in the office spaces upstairs, the places that people congregate. The yellow zone, which is the semi-contaminated zone, and then the red zone where the dirty equipment is brought back from a structure fire and is cleaned. Presently, that's not at all how the hall was set up, and folks will be forgiven, in 1967 for not thinking along these lines. But they've been known for long enough that it's time for us to take action on that. And so that's my passionate plea for that line. The next is allocating $49,436 from in 2025 from the local government climate action program funding to the existing $60,564 from IRF to purchase and equip an electric vehicle to replace the 2011 Chevy Silverado. And so this is, we've used pickup trucks as our primary means for our light vehicles because we use them on every single structure fire to transport all of those contaminated hose and equipment from the scene of the fire back to the fire station without contaminating the frontline apparatus. And so that's the reason for the type of vehicle. And then, of course, in keeping in line with the council's declaration of a climate emergency and moving towards a more sustainable future, this, I think, aligns well with that and is able to access additional funding that's outside of taxation. The third item is add $12,058 from taxation to purchase and acquire a subscription for 2 Starlink satellite systems. This has been something that has been on previous UBCM agendas. This is, I would say, primarily to address an issue that we have when we respond on road rescue calls that are not in our fire protection area, but they are our employees who are out and are without communications. And so operationally, we've seen it where we had the bus rollover that happened a few years ago now. That was in an area with 0 communications for the fire department. And personally, it's one of the things that keeps me up at night is when we're responding out, on a miserable day in the winter to a motor vehicle accident where one of the root causes of that motor vehicle accident is the poor road conditions, and we just lose a fire engine and 4 employees for 2.5 hours, and we just don't even know if they're okay or not. And so, although I would prefer for this funding to come from somewhere else, it is still our employees that are out there and my responsibility. And so that's my thoughts with regards to Starlink. The next one, add $54,000 from taxation to the $65,000 allocated from IRF to purchase 1 set of PFAS-free turnout gear for each Port Alberni Fire Department employee. You may have seen recently the City of Vancouver did this for each of their firefighters. And so PFAS is a lineage of forever chemicals. And although they have many benefits, they're also known to be carcinogens. And so again, along with the first item in this list. It's about trying to create an environment where we're reducing, we can't control that a house fire is going to emit a number of carcinogens. So let's find the places where we do have control to reduce our exposure to as low as reasonably possible. And that's the intention of that line. The next is adding 400,000 from taxation for the replacement of the fire hall roof as per the facility assessment report that was given to Committee of the Whole on November 18th. I'm not a roof expert. I learned of that about the same time that you did, that would be coming so imminently. But that is the recommendation of that report given by subject matter experts. The next is deferring 42,000 that was allocated in the 2025 capital plan for a fueling station. And that is because after some of the work that we did ahead of last year's budget, we discovered that whoever bought that fueling station a number of years ago spec'd out something that was quite robust, and it's not at the end of life. I think there's still a conversation to be had that'll be coupled with a report at some point to discuss whether or not, when it comes time to replace that, whether it's replaced or decommissioned and we access some other means of fueling. But for the time being, it's an opportunity to defer that out of the 2025 budget. And the last one there is deferring the 128,961 from the 2025 capital project plan to 2026 and adding 350,000 for the replacement of the 2006 Ford F-550 Rescue Truck 8. So Rescue Truck 8 is the light vehicle that we spoke about earlier. While by volume, it's done most of its work responding to medical calls when we split the crew, it is our only vehicle that we have that is of its type, which is kitted out and is our primary wildfire response vehicle. And so that is what we are trying to replace here. And it's also trying to replace it in a manner where we know that engine 4, which is the four-wheel drive year 2000 vehicle, that vehicle is an excellent vehicle to respond when we're tasked with road rescues or incidents that are off the paved road. And so knowing that we probably do not want to make the additional investment when it comes time to replace that vehicle to get a four-wheel drive full-size apparatus, which is as you might imagine, even more costly than the regular fire engine. This allows us to do it in a more compact package. When we went out to a number of different vendors to find out what a like-for-like vehicle would be, they've all come back in and around this $450,000 to $500,000 for the replacement of a wildland vehicle of that type. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Councillor Solda and then Councillor Dame.
So just a couple of questions regarding the 2011 Chev. So is there a rebate because you're looking at electric charging, electric car or truck? And what about, okay, and I would like to know how many Ks on the existing one. And also, you'd need to install an electric charger too on top of that. So is there a rebate for the city? I have an electric vehicle, so I know all my personal rebates, but departments are different.
It's a very good question. We would certainly investigate any rebates that were available, and I can't answer that off the top of my head. I do know that there is power that is in the areas that vehicle is presently parked, and the ballpark kilometers of that vehicle, because I drive it, is about 130,000 kilometers on it.
All right. So I'm the type of person that I'll drive it long as it runs. So, I'm one of those people. But I understand in the fire department, it's a different world. So 130K to me is not many K, right? So how do we justify this?
Yeah, so a few things. One is that the estimated life of light vehicles kind of around the city, as I've been told, is 13 years. So this will be just beyond that. This particular vehicle, although those are 130,000 kilometers, I'll call them hard kilometers. There's a lot of Code 3 responses happening in that as well. And then it also will sit there and idle, blocking traffic for hours at an emergency scene. And so although it's not racking up any additional kilometers during that time, there is additional engine hours that are being placed on it, which incidentally, with an electric vehicle, you'd be no longer having those emissions, but the system of the vehicle isn't taxed as hard as it is when you're having to operate a combustion engine on top of that as well.
Okay, so I guess you can't turn it off because fire department, I don't know if you can turn, vehicles you turn off, right? But anyways, that's not where I'm going with that. So I'd be kind of curious to know how much the cost of repairs that we have, how much money we put in to repair the vehicle. And it'd be really interesting to see the stats on that. Okay, my second question is regarding Starlink. I believe in the Starlink from the last windstorm. Being on the emergency committee for the city, representing the city, we've been discussing about getting Starlinks, and we have talked about having it for vehicles, like because of the issue going out to Cathedral Grove and stuff like that, and I believe you're in those conversations too. So we are waiting for a report to come back from the ACRD, because we talked about all the fire trucks getting Starlink and the communication, because when you go to Banfield and that, you can't communicate. But also, so, I mean, it's not much in the 12,000 comparing to everything else, but I still would like to hear from the ACRD and see how we're all going to be working together. And I know subscription, we would have to all look at purchasing. The second one is room to change. I'm just looking, okay, the turnout gear. That's been talked about with the regional departments too, and how important it is just for the health in that. You're coming from one place and you're wearing contamination and you have to strip down, but do you have a room? Like some of the regional district areas, they don't have a separate room to change their turnout gear. So will that have to come back to council to have a special room and where they can just throw their clothes in? So in item number 1, I missed, oh, okay, so that's where that's addressing that. Okay, so, I mean, I believe in that because it is the health of the fire department, firefighters. So I just thought I'd bring those up.
Thank you. I just want to ask procedurally, why is this information, this report coming to us outside of budget? Like, we haven't even received our budget yet to know exactly what's in and exactly what's out. And we have all of these requests to add things in without even having the budget in front of us. So this seems abnormal, and requests to defer specific projects that, again, we're not even sitting here with the actual budget. I'm somewhat lost on the process that we're utilizing right now, because we're making potential decisions. I mean, we're starting with 16%, and this is probably another 5% plus but there's no percentages in front of us. Like, this is just, it feels very odd in terms of process.
Thank you for the question. So it was our administration's plan is to try and set the 25 to 29 budget with items that we're looking at currently, and then we would bring all the information forward at once. So these are requests that are over and above what's currently in or in reductions, and we're trying to get them to you before December. So then in January, when we present the budget, everybody can see what's in it, and then if making changes, et cetera, in there. If there's a different process the council would like to see, we can look to do that in the future. This is the way we set it up this year, though, is to make sure the departments brought things forward to consider for adding into the budget so we could bring a full picture to
It's just,
council.
it's incredibly unclear not having the capital plan in front of us and then being asked to remove things from it and add things into it. We have no basis of comparison to what we are adding or comparing against. So I don't know how to make a decision on any of these items because I don't know what we're potentially moving out as a result. We don't have the full picture, and this just honestly doesn't make sense to me in terms of process. Councillor Mealy.
If I may speak to that, sorry, to the other speakers, just, and that's what I took it as, is we as a council have asked staff to start the budget process early, for them to come with a plan in January. That's what I got out of this, was to deal with these, but not deal with them, because if, once we get back to budget, we can easily say, so we can say today, just take the roof, okay, yeah, we're gonna add the recommendation to council is $400,000 for the roof, and then when it comes budget time, we look at the numbers, we go, that's not gonna work out, so we can take it out. So I didn't take this, and I apologize, maybe staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I took this as getting a jump start on this, getting the plan formulated for January, and then working from there. And I apologize, Madam Mayor, but that's just, that's
I
how I took it.
appreciate that. I mean, but how much of a budget increase is 400,000? We are making these decisions in an absolute silo while we're dealing with a 16% potential increase. We don't even know what's in and what's out. This is just, and I mean, being asked to defer things that we haven't put in yet. I mean, that's, I assume, deferred from last year. But should we be working with a 2024 budget in front of us? I mean, I just honestly, I'm having a really hard time following this. And this is kind of the second group of changes we've had come forward without an actual budget. So I don't know what's in the capital plan that forms that 16% increase to know if those things are more potentially important than the fire hall roof. We don't have the facilities condition assessment, so we don't have that document either. So I honestly don't know really how we're expected to be making decisions on this information. Yeah.
Through the chair, this is a change to the way that we do budget here in Port Alberni. It is a practice I'm used to. Maybe other council, this council obviously isn't. I guess we could have brought the 24 budget that was presented quite a while ago. We could have brought that forward on every report with the change in it. So you could have seen the detailed finance in the financial section of these reports. So I will take that back, but the intent is, as Councillor Mealy was saying, is to try and formulate so we could bring forward a budget that administration is recommending changes to make the overarching changes for next year. But I understand the confusion, and I will talk with finance, but this is the way that I've been used to doing it, and I thought that council was coming along, but that is my misunderstanding. So we can change that for following meetings.
It's just literally that we're being asked to make these decisions, but we don't know what we're comparing them against. So I can't evaluate the importance of these things next to other things that I'm not aware of when we don't have the full context of the budget at this point. I have a lot of questions on these things. I think they're all worthwhile initiatives, but this is the first that I've heard of the turnout gear issue. So like, I think typically we would receive a report on that so that we could understand, not that like a fire department changed their turnout gear, but is this something that is now common for fire departments? Is everyone changing their turnout gear? Like, what's the life of the turnout gear? What's the life of our current turnout gear? So I just feel like we're missing a bit of information. Councillor Haggard.
That's one of the questions I had. I thought last council had actually approved the purchase of this new turnout gear for safety reasons, or is that another set of gear?
I think that was the breathing apparatus.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, but it's just, again, we don't,
Yeah.
we are kind of being asked to make these decisions without details. And we have to prioritize because of the amount of items we have coming into our financial plan this year. So without really background on these items for the most part, like, I can't really support any of them, and I'm sure that there are several in here that need to be supported. So I would like additional information, and I'd like this to come in the context of the budget. Mike.
So what I'm hearing is council would like to see one document with everything in it, with the background, come to a singular meeting, is what I'm hearing. Now, with additional reports to explain the new items that are there, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm understanding it correct. So when we bring it forward, the increase would be quite a bit because we are not talking about them individually. I guess I do understand some of your concerns about the safety gear and why there wasn't a separate report on that. So I understand that. But I'm just wanting to make sure that when we bring it in January, we have the correct information, because the budget will be quite long, and that's fine. We were breaking it out per department and bringing the levels of service and trying to look at it in a way that it's bite-sized. So when we bring the full thing, we aren't concentrating on items that council didn't want us to look at. So I know that's maybe not explaining myself the best, but that was the intention.
If we add all of these things in, are we starting from a 20% tax increase?
If we add everything in from all the reports, probably much
40?
higher.
Like, so I guess rather than, a reasonably, like, there's some detail in the report, but not a lot of detail, recognizing there's a lot of information to put out there. Yeah, I don't know, like, I can't evaluate these things against other departments' needs. Like, we're deciding on the fire department's needs. We haven't heard the other department's needs. We're gonna pass some of these things and then pass more, again, with no context of where we're actually at. So from my perspective, this process is just not working currently. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm wondering if maybe the issue is that this could have been framed more as for information, and we could have just accepted the report and received the report and been informed for the upcoming budget process instead of having recommended motions in front of us. Is that maybe the intent of staff seems to be to bring information, and maybe it's the decision aspect of it at this point that's the problem.
Yeah, I think deciding on each department individually on different days without having them next to each other and without having the starting point of the budget to know what's already in there, because I assume there is a significant amount of capital projects already in the budget at 16%.
Through the chair, correct. Back in the first report when Andrew brought it forward, that was the budget that we were looking at for 2025. I believe it was I'm going off my memory, so I might get the wrong. It was like 4.3 for operational items, and then the remainder of the budget was for capital items. It was itemized in that report, but we didn't bring them forward every report after that. At the one meeting, I did say that we would try and bring any changes to service levels in each department to you by December, and that's what we're trying to do. So these are over and above what was in the plan, or if we could defer items out of the plan, that is what we were trying to do. Now, could have we made it more clear by adding in each section or the full financial plan on each one? We could have. So again, we didn't on this one. I know there was some with when we brought the service levels that had a financial aspect to it, but we didn't continue that right through the full process. So yeah, that's
When we got the first report on the budget, it was just a cover report. We haven't received the budget. I think that's,
Yeah, I don't think it was the 25 to 29. I
Yeah.
believe it was still the 24 to 28 budget that was at that time. We were just talking about the existing capital projects in it.
thank you. So my point is, I don't have a list of the capital projects that are in this year's budget. And we're being asked at multiple meetings now to add other things into the budget without really having a full picture of what's in. Would council like to go through these item by item? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so just some notes as I have. Add $50,000 from taxation for the functional study and design. My question would be, there are grants available through FireSmart or the UBCM. Is that something that through you to staff, it doesn't have to be the chief and it doesn't have to be an answer right now because this is a committee of the whole, but is that something that we would look at first, if I could? I know it says out of taxation, but there is grants available, and we are talking about, revamping the fire department. I'd also like to say I'd like that study done before I do a $400,000 roof. So that's just kind of one there. So, and again, it's not a question, it can just be comments and you can look into it, but just by looking up, FireSmart and the UBCM, if there is funds available, I mean, and it's pretty easy. It's a 1967 building. It's easy to tell them, hey, it's one of the oldest buildings that we've got, and we'd really like to keep our functional fire department going. Let's see here. 2011 Chevy Silverado 4x4. That is one of the best years of Chevy Silverados. Sorry, Chief, I apologize. I'd like you to keep it a little longer. However, and I'm a little torn on the electric part of it, but I do see that it can be there is a grant available from local government climate action program to fund it, and then the equipment replacement reserve fund to fund it. So it would be out of zero taxation for this year if we do replace it with an EV. I would just like to know what EV we're talking about exactly, because again, I know you kind of alluded to it, but I would not be in favor of replacing a 2011 Chevy Silverado with a Tesla. Sorry, Councillor Solda. So just because I just think the truck is functional and it's always been that way, and it is used for multiple uses as well, right? So Starlink, I'm in total support of that for everything that they do. And again, that's a great example of going down the Bamfield Road, which I have been a victim of a crash on Bamfield Road and had to get out myself, climb the hill and do all that. And there's no cell service out there back then. So yeah, I'd like a little more information just on the turnout gear. I do see, so it's a polyfluoroalkyl substances, and so when you look it up on the Government of Canada website, firefighting foams is the first example of it. So it's obviously an issue within the firefighting industry. So, but I would just love a little more information on, is it needed now? And again, like you said, Madam Mayor, how many other municipalities are going to that? I think we'll have to go to that eventually, obviously, but how many are? And then deferring the two, totally fine with at this point. The 06 Ford F550, is that gas or diesel, Chief? Sorry. It's diesel, okay. So if it's a 6 liter or 6 Ford, it's been bulletproof, that thing's gonna go for a long time. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you,
I
Councillor
could, if
Mealy.
you like.
Additional comments? Councillor Councillor Dane.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, there's a couple of these that I have questions about. The one that I feel actually really confidently that we do need to go ahead and approve, and whether that's today or not, I'm not as worried about, but near future, is the PFAS free turnout gear. I've actually had a motion written sitting in my notes in my phone for a long time, just sort of, I don't know, I'm kicking myself that I didn't bring it forward sooner, but it is something that was on my radar for quite a long time, and we talked about it last year at UBCM when I attended the firefighter day, and it is a very serious problem, and it is making firefighters sick wearing this gear. It just absolutely is, and we we don't stand for carcinogens in environments anymore, in work environments anymore, and I just think that that's something that, cost or not, we're just going to have to do that one. As far as the rest of them, so the roof, I mean, it seems like all the city roofs are failing at the same time, which, I mean, like, I guess my question is, for the assessment that was done, the facility assessment report, like, how thorough was the report, like, the assessment? Was it, you know, like a certified roofer who went roof to roof and checked them all and checked the lifespan and was like, this has got to happen now? Or is this something that we can get, you know, a second opinion on, and we can get another 5 years out of, or something like that? Like, it's a big chunk of change to be dropping all at once, unexpectedly. And I think that if we can limp any of these along for a few years, there's no active leaks, there's no, you know, imminent failures, I think that's probably what we should do, is just see which ones we can put off. And I hate kicking the can down the road, but we've done that in the past and it hasn't paid off. But just given the situation we're in, where we can, I think we should. And I also share Councillor Solda's concern about the Starlink. I would really not want to have to pay for that. If I think that could be an ACRD thing, and there is a grants and a discussion happening, it sounds like, that I wasn't aware of. So that one, maybe we postpone it until after we know more about what the ACRD plans to do. I don't know much about vehicles, so I can't really chime in too much about that one, but I'll stay out of it. But if we need it, we need it. Yeah, so I think that I'll just go ahead right now, and if we don't want to support it now, then I guess we'll talk about it later. But I'll move number 4. I'll move that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council direct administration to include $54,600 in 2025 from taxation to the $65,000 allocated from IRF to purchase one set of PFAS-free turnout gear for each PAFD employee.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. I was just going to say, once we finish this one, my recommendation is going to be that every single other one come forward to budget. Okay. And that we don't make any decisions around budget until we have the budget in hand. I think we should have the facilities condition assessment report as well, as we don't have that document, but we've seen it referenced. Like you said, we don't know what type of inspections, like we don't have the information because we haven't seen that report yet. We've only seen reference to it. So I am in full support of proceeding with this one. Outside of that, I don't think we should make any more budget decisions until we have the budget. And we can evaluate everything alongside everything else. Councillor Mealy.
No, sorry, Madam Mayor, I was just going to wait for your motion. Oh, sorry, Madam Mayor, I was just going to wait for your motion to speak about it. Let's deal with Councillor Dames first, and then we'll deal with your motion.
Any other comments on this piece? Okay, seeing none. On the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And I wasn't really going to make a motion, but I guess it could be a motion. Go ahead, Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just because I think we can knock a couple of these off, and merely because, and the reason why I say that is logically, deferring the 2 at the bottom, I'm pretty confident staff and chief wouldn't bring that forward unless we had the ability to defer it. So I'm okay with deferring it. When it comes to the Starlink, my proposed motion with that, after listening to my fellow councillors, would be to approach the regional district for funding options for the Starlink system, rather than bringing it into the budget altogether.
Councillor Solda.
And just remember, it's in discussion right now, and it's going to come back to the emergency committee meeting again. And so hopefully before we do finish the budget, and then if we need to bring it back, we'll bring it back.
Absolutely. Councillor Mealy.
So if I may, Madam Mayor, I would love to move number 6, which is defer $42,000 allocated to the 2025 capital project plan to 2029 for the fueling station. And if I could do them both together at the same time, number 7, which is defer $128,961 allocated in the 2025 capital project plan to 2026, and add 350, I apologize. 2026 would, maybe I need clarification on that. 2026 is, we'd be adding $350,000 to 2026 for the replacement of the 06, is that correct? Okay, so it's deferring all the way to 2026. So I'll make that motion as well, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So move to defer both. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it for discussion, but I need
Seconded.
clarification.
Councillor Solda.
So could I just have a repeat of that motion because it's kind of broken?
Sorry, no, it's just thank you, Councillor Sold, I apologize. So it's number 6 and number 7. It's just the two deferrings on the bottom of page number 2. So we're going to defer, the recommendation to defer $42,000 to 2029 for the fueling station, and then defer $128,981 allocated in 2025 to 2026, and then add for the replacement of the 2006 F550.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And I will move that 1, 2, and 5 be deferred to budget. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Solda. Any further comments? Seeing none, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. And I will move that number 3 be referred to the Regional District Emergency Planning Committee. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And Fire Department 2025 staffing financial plan implications.
Thank you. So before you is the 2025 financial plan implications. So this came as result of the preliminary master plan report that was delivered at the last committee of the whole by our consultant. It does also take into account the budget year that we're in. And so you'll see here that the administrative support would start in Q3 as per the recommendation, and the 2 additional firefighters would start in Q4 as per the recommendation, which is not necessarily the recommendation of the preliminary fire master plan, but again, just taking into account the budget situation that we're in. So the background there is as stated that there's a lot of administrative support work that is presently being done by exempt staff in the fire department. So there's a plethora of efficiencies that could be found by moving this into an administrative assistant type of a role. This has appeared in reports to council for, I believe, about 15 years, that there's been various reports coming to council that have highlighted this position. Through the BEAR preliminary report, if you look at comparable communities, we are the only community on that list that doesn't have at least one person that occupies that position in a full-time capacity. And some of them have more than one individual that is working in that capacity. The second line there is for the addition of 2 staff in suppression. And so there's some of the justification for that is the increase in call volume, the reference to the fire underwriter survey report that says that a pumper company that receives in excess of 2,500 calls a year, additional companies are needed. So that is, we're now in our second year of surpassing that as call volume. We're also finding that we're just having difficulty, this year we've had 3 long-term absences due to illness or injury. And we're just having a tough time even just filling that minimum staffing on the truck of 4. Even this past Friday, on the first half of night shift, we ran that with a crew of 3, not because we didn't offer the overtime, but because we were unsuccessful in finding anybody to fill that, and the same for a half shift on Saturday as well. And in addition to that, we are really relying right now on our automatic aid, mutual aid partners with regards to Cherry Creek, Beaver Creek, and Sprout Lake, and we're forever thankful for that. And their call volume is increasing on their own, and then we're increasing it again. I heard the other day that Beaver Creek is surpassing 200 calls a year, which is quite a bit for a volunteer fire department. So part of that enters into the narrative of the WorkSafe regulations, which is that you require a rapid intervention team to be established within 10 minutes of that first engine company arriving on scene. And so part of adding 2 additional people is that we would look to add those people when we anticipate that the volunteer fire departments are less able to respond with immediacy. So obviously the volunteer fire departments are mostly comprised of folks that are working in another occupation, and those other occupations are more likely than not day shift Monday to Friday. And so that's where we would look to target our additional 2 folks that we would bring on board as per this report. The report really focuses in on 2025, but you will see within the spreadsheet that it does consider other recommendations that were made by the consultant that I truly do believe in, but pushing those out into subsequent years in order to not contribute to the tax burden all in 2025.
Thank you. Questions, comments from council? Councillor Solda.
So, for overtime, I'm kind of curious, do we have the stat, well, you must have the stats on overtime that's been accumulated. I'm just kind of curious to know how much overtime, because since the firefighters have had to accumulate some overtime, right? So if you have those stats, I'd be really interested, or if you have them on you. The other one is you said there was 3 long-term people are off right now. So do you have a replacement? Like, was there a replacement? How are you working that whole system?
As I pull up my my budget thing, I did have it at the last meeting, but I'll just pull it back up again here. So this year we have spent $212,636 year to date as of last week in overtime. Now that overtime, and of course with the last meeting there was a request for a more detailed analysis of where that overtime is being spent. But that overtime would include everything from structure fires, wildfires, crew callbacks for out-of-town road rescues, which we're recouping some of that money, as well as coverage for sickness and injury. We don't have 3 people off all at once right now, thankfully. We did have 1 person that was off, and if you recall, at the beginning of this year, as per the approval from last year, we brought in a new firefighter on a 3-month period in order to bring up the skill sets, and then have her continue on the intention was to have that employee laid off at the 3-month point. And it just so happened that first long-term injury was just after we had issued the layoff notice, but hadn't actually laid that person off. So we were able to actually cover the majority of that person's time on straight time with that individual. So that ended up working as intended, which was great. Then we had the one employee that left our organization, and so that same initial employee ended up filling that vacancy, which then made them unavailable when we had the one individual that was off, that is returned, I think, last week. And we do have one individual that is still off at this time.
All right, and regarding the administrative support position, you are absolutely right. That's been an ongoing issue for many, many, many years, and it's been bypassed. So just thought I'd bring that up.
Thank you. Are you able to speak to what the actual cost of these positions are, as I assume we're only seeing prorated numbers, so what will the 2026 costs be?
Yeah, so, and sorry, as I look at the numbers here, I'll take responsibility that there may be an error in the outlying years for the admin assistant role. I believe that number is actually the 0.6, so it's not a full-time, the 0.6 administrative assistant, and that number may be for the full year. And I don't want to put the director of finance on the spot, as he's just returned, and he gave me good numbers, and then I probably messed them up. The firefighters, as you look in subsequent years, so we have the 59,380. And then next year, that would increase to 297,262, which would be the full year loaded costs for those two individuals. And then the subsequent increases are just, I believe they're CPI increases.
Okay. Are there, I guess, additional, like, it goes from 297 to 330 to 360. That seems like 10% increase almost every year. So is that possibly to do with like firefighters every year moving up in the first few years of their career? It doesn't look like CPI, and so I'm just trying to get a grasp on what the actual numbers will be, if those numbers are the correct numbers, and that's just to do with them progressing.
Sorry, yeah, you are right in that during their initial period, they do get an increase as they go from a probationary firefighter. 6 months in, they hit their fourth class, and then they continue to progress through those in those initial years. So there is an escalation through those first years.
Thank you. So the 60,000 we're talking about for 2025 budget is 300,000 next year. Okay, Councillor Haggard.
I agree with you, Chief Owens. We can't keep depending on our volunteer fire departments in the region to support our fire department, because they're going to get themselves burnt out as well. So we have to look at other options. I noticed at Squamish, Campbell River, and Powell River, you do use on-call firefighters or part-time firefighters. Is that an option that we've ever looked at?
I would say that we currently do use volunteer firefighters, and we do that through those automatic aid agreements. And many of those folks live in the community. I was noting, I believe it was last week, I had a meeting at City Hall, and one of the volunteer fire trucks duty vehicle was on 10th Avenue and another one was on Anderson. So, you know, those people often are living in the city anyway, and we're already benefiting from their services. There had been, prior to 1967, new volunteers that were being onboarded. I believe that practice ended in 1967, and then there were some folks that stayed on until they retired out of the volunteer fire service. There are now collective agreement implications there as well, where it is written within the collective agreement that we don't have volunteer firefighters operating out of the Port Alberni Fire Department. So that would have to be something that would have to be addressed. But I really think that we are benefiting immensely right now from not only one volunteer fire department crew, but 3 volunteer fire department crews on top of our career staff without actually having to outfit them, without having to directly train them, without paying for compensation, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't think I was clear with my question. POC, I'm assuming means paid on call. So other fire departments are using part-time employees or paid on call employees. So is that something that we have ever looked at instead of hiring full-time firefighters to fill in these holes? Have we ever looked at using paid on call or part-time firefighters?
Yeah, I would say that paid on call firefighters are synonymous with volunteer firefighters. So it used to be that everybody was not compensated that was a volunteer firefighter, and then eventually they started compensating them for the time that they gave to their departments.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Sorry, have you looked at part-time firefighters?
We've not looked at part-time firefighters as of yet, and as I'm just kind of thinking in real time, I'm not sure. It's certainly not a common practice within British Columbia to utilize part-time firefighters, so it would have to be something that would need to be really investigated more if we were going to go down that road. But I will say that in terms of trying to meet the objectives here, these are full-time needs that we have.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My only comment would be or question, it doesn't have to be answered right now, is along the lines of what Councillor Haggard's saying, but is it even allowable within our collective bargaining agreement? What is allowable, part-time on call, paid on call? So doesn't have to answer right now, Chief. I appreciate that and staff, but just going back to Councillor Haggard's questions, I'd like to know if that's a possibility within the CBA, because if it's not within the CBA, then we can't. And yeah, it's just not worth talking about.
Yeah, just coming back again. Yeah, that's good. Within the collective agreement right now, it does specifically state that we can't have the volunteer firefighters, and again, those would be synonymous with the paid on call. If there was something where you had an individual that was a part of the bargaining unit, then that would have to be negotiated with the local in order to bring on somebody. The hours of work, as an example, are incorporated within the collective agreement. And so if we were to deviate from those standard hours of work, that would have to be agreed upon between Local 1667 and the city.
Thank you. Other comments, questions? Okay. Direction from council? Councillor Dame.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm wondering if this is another thing that we want to refer to the budget process.
I think absolutely, especially because the numbers look low in the motion, but they are, almost $400,000 for these positions in 2026. So again, I think that decision needs to be made in conjunction with our full financial plan and recognition of what our 2026 financial plan will look like.
In that case, I will move that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council refer these 2 motions to the future budget process.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Mealy. Seeing no comments on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you, Chief Owens. And moving on to RCMP, body worn camera implementation and financial plan implications.
Good evening. Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Kim Ivasich, and I'm the manager of Police Support Services. I am here together with Inspector Kim Bruce to present 2 recommendations as outlined in my report that will address the facility and staffing requirements associated with the implementation of body-worn cameras. This includes the addition of a new position, an electronic disclosure clerk, and a renovation for a secure equipment room that will house the body-worn camera, as well as an additional police equipment. With the MOU for disclosure compliance, a new digital evidence management system, and the implementation of body-worn cameras, we will have to process an increased volume of digital evidence and meet specific disclosure requirements. It is critical that we expand our staffing to ensure we can manage these requirements effectively. Secondly, a renovation for a secure storage room would provide storage as required for the body-worn camera with better organization and streamlined access to all equipment and tools, which will enhance overall operational effectiveness. The financial implications of the recommendations are contained within the report. I would like to note that there is opportunity to divert some funds that were already included in the 2025 financial plan toward the equipment room renovation. I urge the committee to support both our recommendations. By doing so, we will not only improve the functioning of our police detachment, but also enhance the safety and security of our community. Thank you for your consideration. I invite any questions you may have for us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much for the report. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your time tonight. When it comes, so first of all, I'm in favor of body-worn cameras, and if that's the cost, that's the cost. It is what it is. But I've always been in favor of that. Not only, and it's for the safety of everybody involved, as well as our members in the detachment. My one question would be, considering this is a piece of equipment, and maybe I missed it. It's been a long day, long couple days for me. Are we charging out for equipment replacement reserve fund? And will we be? I'm just thinking down the road is when we need to start going over these cameras and that, are we going to be pulling from taxation, or are we going to be able to pull from IRF fund because it's a piece of equipment?
Thanks for the question. So the one proposal is already included in the RCMP budget, and that's on the body-worn cameras and the actual apparatus itself. What we're looking at is the storage room, and then also on the administrative side, so the city forces to deal with the material and the information that comes in. So a secure lockup for the footage, but also some of the other items at the detachment currently, and then for the wages for somebody to handle the evidence material. I don't know as much about it, but I'm sure, either Kim can answer the question. Yeah.
No, and I understand that. I guess that's, and I apologize. Maybe I'm just a little off topic here, but my question still remains. It is a piece of equipment, these body-worn cameras, and I apologize. I'm not talking about the position of the body-worn cameras. Is it something that we will be charging out as part of the equipment replacement reserve fund so we can replace them in the future? And I'll put a caveat that you don't have to answer right now. You can come back.
Well, through the chair, again, I would have to look at it. I know that it was considered through the RCMP contract, but so I'm not sure that it is actually something the city is actually replacing. I believe it's the RCMP through their contract that will update the body-worn cameras, not out of the municipal fund. I think I got that right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Solda and then Councillor Haggard.
So I have a question regarding the lifespan of a camera and also maintenance. Who's going to look after the maintenance of the cameras if there's issues? I understand putting the data away into a proper lockup and everything. It was just like when we built this police station, the evidence room needed to be a little better than what it was. So, because yeah, so I'm just kind of curious to know on the lifespan. And also, we, federally, we have to have it, and provincially, I mean, we have no choice. We can't say, well, we don't want any. I believe in the body cams, so, but I just, people need to understand it's not just because we want cameras on our police officers.
If I may, the body-worn cameras, there's really no life expectancy assigned to them. It's basically like any other piece of dynamic equipment. If they get exposed to inclement weather, if they get damaged in the course of a call for service, it's going to be dependent on what they're exposed to in the course of everyday policing that will dictate the efficacy of any given body-worn camera at any given time. The contingency that we have at the detachment will be assigned to frontline operational officers, and with a 3% contingency to acting as spare cameras whenever one gets damaged. And coming back to the cost for the cameras, that cost is couched as an indirect cost within the police budget. And I'm sorry, your second question?
The maintenance of the cameras.
So the maintenance of the cameras is going to be aided by Axon Canada, who we've procured to produce those cameras right across the division, and nationally right across Canada. So Axon will be helping us with the maintenance of those cameras.
Okay, and I just admire the officers that have to wear all this gear, and how do you maneuver with so much around you? Yeah, total respect there.
Thank you. Councillor Haggard.
Thank you. One of the options here is council defer boardroom upgrades to support funding the storage room renovation. Is that what we're referring to, Kim? Yeah, so do you know how much was in the budget for the boardroom upgrades? Was that $150,000 as well? Do you know?
There was money set in for the body-worn camera installation for 16,000, and then there was 17,000 for the boardroom. Both are able to be deferred to this, and the 16,000 was for the body-worn camera before we knew of the secure requirements for how they were to be stored. So that is 33 in total.
Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions, comments? Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just if we're looking for direction, so these are something that's going to happen anyway. So I totally see the value in making a recommendation to council today. And I'll go through it if that's possible. I'll make a motion that the committee of the whole recommend council direct administration to include in the following in the 2025-2029 financial plan. So line 22122 is operational service level increase for the purpose of a new position, RCMP electronic disclosure clerk, and the numbers are below. Would you like to do it separately, Madam Mayor? Sure. Then I'll stop there then.
No, sorry, I meant to go ahead and
Go
read
ahead
them
with
all
it.
together. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so then the next one would be 2025 general capital expenditure for the purpose of a secure policeman equipment room renovation in the amount of $150,000. And then the third one would be council defer boardroom upgrades to support funding the storage room renovation altogether.
I'll second that.
Thank you. So this is just a motion to refer it back to council, recommend for approval. Great. Councillor Solda.
Just one more question. When do we expect the budget goes through the cameras? When are they coming?
So Port Alberni is slated for an August 2025 implementation. So there will be a week or two of training to get our officers conversant with the processes relative to body-worn cameras, and then the go live will be in August.
So watch out in September, Councilor Solda.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, on the motion, all in favor? Carried, none opposed. Thank you. And item number 5, Canadian Mental Health Association Parks Caretaker Residences.
Madam Chair,
6 city-owned parks include permanent building structures that include caretaker residence and public washrooms here in the city of Port Alberni. Since 2020, we've had a lease agreement with the local Canadian Mental Health Association for tenancy at those parks. Because many communities have gone away from an on-site caretaker model, staff would like to confirm at this stage what level of service the committee and essentially council would like to offer at these parks. So on page 53 of the agenda package, 11 options are outlined for the committee's consideration. Further to the committee's recent mention this evening that you'd like to refer all expenditures to January when the entire budget is in front of you, the committee may prefer to forego the 11 options that are outlined in the report and instead ask questions or seek additional information from staff. Thank you very much. Comments, questions? Councillor Mealy.
Questions, all right, here we go. No. Just on number B, the recommendation is to demolish one of the 6 caretaker units and public washrooms each year, starting with Paper Mill Dam. Is there a reason, through you to staff, was there a reason Paper Mill Dam was the first choice?
Yes, so Madam Chair, on page 53 of your report indicates the second paragraph at the top talks about how 5 of the units are in fair condition and the unit at Paper Mill Dam requires the most immediate repair. So yes, there is rationale for that in that since Paper Mill Dam is in the most immediate need of repair, the idea is that staff would start with that as the first unit and then extrapolate the work 1 unit thereafter over this course of 6 years. Thank you. Councillor Dane.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am wondering if we are going to renew the lease agreement with the Canadian Mental Health Association and simultaneously start tearing down the caretaker units. What are the implications as far as the current tenants if we have an ongoing agreement while we're tearing down the buildings?
So, Madam Chair, as outlined is on the notes on the top of page 54 about what the implications are if we are or not renewing that lease. So, staff have already reached out to the staff of the local CMHA association as well. And it would be city staff's desire to continue to work with those folks, be transparent in the process. So, again, housing is an initiative of the provincial government, not local government. So we want to be careful that we're staying in our lane as municipal government. The staff's intent, though, would be to work closely with CMHA to ensure that everyone's clear about timelines, so no one is left surprised or CMHA in a lurch where there's folks that are finding themselves unhoused. Thank you. So my take on this issue as a whole is that we do not want to be making significant updates to the caretaker buildings. However, the ones that are okay as they are, I would like to see them remain as housing. And so understanding the Paper Mill Dam one, I know that one has been a concern for some time. If it makes sense to demolish it now or work toward that because we are not going to be further investing in them. I understand that. When we go down to kind of the subsequent recommendations and we talk about replacing bathrooms, and Blair Park is one that is included in there. I mean, Blair Park has some pretty good bathrooms right now. And the caretaker residence as a whole, of course, from the exterior, and I don't know what the interior is like, but it certainly doesn't seem like the type of building we would be considering demolishing. So I'm wondering if we've gotten a little bit off track of what the intent of kind of moving forward with this was, that we don't want to be investing in these facilities going forward. However, some of them are very much, I would say, not in need of being demolished. Is there an in-between option? And I guess certainly like the bathrooms are a concern to me. Like the Blair Park ones are the only ones I will say that I'm familiar with as a park. But they certainly, I couldn't imagine like tearing that building down and then needing to build new bathrooms. It just doesn't seem like it makes sense. Yeah, so Madam Chair, on page 54 there where it speaks to implications, it's also got a variety of options within there. So that idea of kind of the choose your own adventure, if it were, if the committee is wishing to retain washrooms as they are versus replace, so essentially carving off or separating the building and looking at either demolishing the residence
and retaining the washrooms or replacing the washrooms themselves or leave it as green space. Also, of course, as the outline of those 11 different options as well is leave them as they are. And so it could be a case, so as our facilities manager has outlined in the report here, starting on page 60, there's sort of a line by line or building by building assessment of the age of each asset, as well as its current state as well. So really it's, the world is your oyster, if it were, for the committee as far as how you wish to move forward. The intent is that staff wanted to provide the committee with as much information as possible so that you're armed to make informed decisions. But yes, the short answer is we could absolutely look to leave some or all of the structures as they are. Paper mill dam specifically, I will reinforce that at this stage, in the event that a tenant were to move out of that space and it were vacant, staff would advise against housing anyone in that space. So again, 5 of the 6 are in varying states of repair. The one at Paper Mill Dam needs to be demolished in staff's opinion.
Thank you. Comments? Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I think that I fully agree that we don't want to be investing any more money in these buildings, but until such a time as money is required to be invested in them, I suppose there's no imminent need to demolish them other than one that's already been identified. So I'm wondering if we want to instead move that we demolish them as maintenance becomes required.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of information in this report, and again, quite a few budget implications on varying timelines. I think it's information to start with, and I'm not sure, like, I would certainly be comfortable directing that the intent would be to not do any more work on Paper Mill Dam and to move toward demolishing when it makes sense. I think that the rest of them, in my opinion, need a bit more of a thoughtful approach because they are all valued park spaces, and like they don't need to be residences necessarily, but currently they are bathroom facilities that are well used, and there might be consideration to whether some of those bathrooms are needed and how we would want to replace them. How would council like to proceed for today? Councillor Mealy.
I'm just going to throw out a stupid question, Madam Mayor. And I know I've been told many times they're never stupid questions, but and logistically it might be a nightmare, but have we thought about approaching CMHA about purchasing the buildings? And I know some of them are inside parks and, would have to worry about an access to that, but is that an option? It's being used as housing, and we would definitely don't want to see somebody who is in there now to be displaced. But again, we don't want to put extra money into it. So again, it's kind of a stupid question, kind of logistically a nightmare, but is it something that we would even consider talking to CMHA about?
So, Madam Chair, at this point, staff have not engaged CMHA to get in the business of being realtors and selling our, just to be clear, these are city-owned assets in city parks, just so the folks staying up to watch the meeting are aware. Of course, if that's the wish of the committee, to direct council, to direct staff to approach CMHA about a potential purchase, absolutely staff can do that, and staff would recommend that whatever that relationship might be, ensuring that we're meeting council's expectation of level of service. So I would presume that means that retaining some sort of public washroom facility regardless of what happens with the rest of the structures, but again, would defer to council.
I would assume that these are all not separate titled. There would be work required with subdivision and things like that. So definitely I think consideration for the future if we wanted to look at that option. It's an idea. Councillor Haggard.
I think that's a great idea, but I can see it being a nightmare. So I would not support it at this time. Thank you, but great idea. Okay, average idea.
Councillor Mealy.
All right, Madam Mayor, well, let's just start there. Let's try that. I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend the Council authorize renewal of the lease agreement between the City of Port Alberni and the Canadian Mental Health Association, Port Alberni, for a 6-year term at City Parks caretaker units located at Roger Creek Park, Russell Park, Williamson Park, Blair Park, Klitza Park, and Paper Mill Dam Park.
Is there a seconder?
Okay, second for discussion, but I do have a question.
Councillor Solda.
I don't know, do we want to go with 6 years? And that's do we want 6 years? Because if we're talking about as they come up and they really need some big dollars attached to them for renovations, or who's going to do that, you know? So, I mean, somebody did mention that. And so do we want to really go 6 years?
I think there is some wording in the report around what that renewal would look like. Willa, do you want to speak to that?
So, Madam Chair, the magic number of 6 years is based on some quick math of six properties, 1 per year. And so very scientific approach we've taken. So further to Councillor Solda has mentioned, though, is that, again, it is based on 1 unit per year. If we're looking at what is the estimated lifespan or remaining life in each of those structures, it could be greater than that 6-year period. So staff would caution the committee as well that, of course, you don't want to have an open-ended agreement. You need to put some timelines on there. However, staff are unsure at this point if each facility will come up for renewal or disposal at that 6-year mark, or if those units are still in great shape in year 4 or 5, would we adjust the timeline?
Thank you. Okay. I guess on the renewal of the leases, would we be changing the language to be transparent that we don't intend to make any more capital improvements to these buildings?
Yes, so Madam Chair, that would be my recommendation that, again, the intent of renewing the agreement as it's written, as the recommendation is written in the report, is that idea that it would have certainty and assurance for CMHA while we look to exit ourselves from that relationship and exit ourselves from those buildings. So, so that's where the intent stems from.
Thank you. Okay. Any further comments on this piece? Councillor Dame.
I could try to formulate a motion with my extremely tired brain right now. Oh, I'm sorry. That's how tired my brain is. We have the next motion. Okay, let's deal with this one first.
Thank you on this motion. Thank you, Councillor Dame. Okay, seeing no additional comments on the motion to renew the leases, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. None opposed. And Councillor Dame.
Oh yeah, how'd you know? Yeah. Okay. So. I move that Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct staff to demolish the caretaker building at Paper Mill Dam and bring back a recommendation for a timeline regarding the demolition of the other buildings, of the other caretaker buildings, prioritizing no further investment, but utilizing the building for the best value. How's that? How's that, Sarah?
I will second it. Could you explain it a little further?
I don't know that I can, actually. Yeah, sure. So my thought is that I don't know how long those buildings are going to last. My intention is to try to direct staff to make that decision based on no further investment, first off, and second off, not demolishing a building if it continues to serve its purpose of a bathroom, a washroom, whatever other. The question that I'm not sure about is if we want to continue using them for housing long term, and I think that would be perhaps an amendment to what I just moved or an additional motion.
Thank you. I think that is a great start then. I will just first, since we've lumped Paper Mill Dam into that, I will first say that I can see all of the issues with this, with Paper Mill Dam. However, I'm still not completely sure that I want us to spend, I think it was $120,000 to demolish the Paper Mill Dam house in this budget year. Are there, like, that park is not even in city limits, and recognizing that it is our building, and that, so if I understand correctly, someone does live in it currently, and this is thinking about when they exit it, or we would be asking them to have it vacated?
At this stage, Madam Chair, it's when it becomes vacant, we would not have another tenant in that space.
And that tenant has been there long-term, have they not? Reasonably
Yes.
long-term?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. So it sounds like it may not necessarily be a 2025 issue, or are we expecting that there is, like, based on all of this work, are we expecting that the tenant may vacate?
Madam Chair, I couldn't confirm at this stage. The greater concern is the structure itself. So one option as well is that should the building deteriorate, we can look to either surround, so rather than take the building down in its entirety or even a portion of, look to secure it if we can, shore it up, perhaps put construction fencing around that sort of thing. Another item, just to clarify as well, with Councillor Dame's motion, is around if we're demolishing and when the time comes, is it demolishing the caretaker unit and the public washroom that's adjacent to, or looking to retain the existing washroom if we can, or just ensuring that when it comes from the committee to council and then subsequently staff, just being clear so we understand council's intent.
Yeah, thank you. And so on those two items, my preference would be that we retain the bathrooms wherever possible. And on Paper Mill Dam, as much as I would hate to see us board up a building and put construction, fencing around it, I also would rather prioritize the dollars that we have to save them to demolish a caretaker's residence that is in a much-used city park, even if that's 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, than to demolish one that is outside of city limits in a park I don't even understand why we own. And so I recognize we do own it, and so it is our obligation and our responsibility, and I also recognize it is much loved, but it is not in city limits, and we are having a conversation about regional parks. Paper Mill Dam probably should be the first one we're talking to the regional district about, and so I would love to see us not incur a large expense as a result of a service we've been kind of weirdly providing just because we do, that really ultimately it's not even in the city. So I would rather see us make sure that we are kind of having funds ready and available to deal with Williamson Park, was that one of them? I don't know. Whichever, the parks that are within city limits, that are our playgrounds, that need to make sure that, we're not gonna, that once those buildings are ready to be demolished, that we have the funds ready to demolish them. So I think a little bit more thought from my perspective on the Paper Mill Dam one specifically, because I do think it's a bit complex. Councillor Dame and then Councillor Haggard.
All right, well, given that my very messy motion doesn't seem to be serving the intended purpose, maybe I'll just rescind it and we can try again.
Councillor Haggard and then Councillor Solda.
I was just going to clarify Councillor Dame's motion, because he said no investment, but some of these repairs are very minimal, such as a hot water tank. So hot water tank, we might keep the building going for a few more years. So I think you have to be careful about the wording. Thanks.
Councillor Dame.
Agreed if the intention is to continue using them for housing long-term.
Yes.
If we don't intend to use them for housing long-term, then we may not need to do the same sort of investment into the building, and I think that's the real question here. Personally, I don't think that we should continue the practice of using them for housing long-term. Especially, I don't think that the buildings are something that we should be investing in, and as long as there's people in them, we have to keep fixing them up, so.
Thank you. Councillor Solda.
I just want to go back to Paper Mill Dam, and unfortunately, I don't agree not to do anything with the building. Like, to me, take it down because of safety issues, whose insurance is this going to play on? And you can do all the fencing you want around, but people have gotten through fencing and they've done like fires and stuff like that. And there's a lot of trees, Madam Mayor, around Paper Mill Dam. No, but I'm referring to fire. And if there's not an immediate response, that can go up in the summertime. And it's so, you know, there's a lot of great trees up in that area. But the whole thing is, I do have concerns, a lot of concerns, not taking it and just putting a fencing around it. I'm just kind of curious, it's been a long time since I've been up in that area regarding the bathrooms, what kind of shape they're in. Who's going to maintain them is the next thing, and who's going to pick up the garbage and look after all that. Is that going to be staff time on top of that? So I do agree that we definitely should have bathrooms up there, and maybe it's one of those Alberta bathrooms at that moment, you know, I'm just throwing that out. But anyways, I just have some concerns and just keeping it maintained. And I know it's out in the regional district, but then we better do something to not let that happen.
Thank you. So I don't think that any of this is necessarily really a urgent issue to sort out. So we've given direction to renew the leases. There is a tenant at Paper Mill Dam, so we're not going to urgently have to make a firm decision on this. I do completely recognize and agree with Councillor Solda's comments as well. I just want to make sure that we prioritize the dollars that we have for the most used facilities and parks that we have. That said, I think we could, I'm not sure any action or direction on Paper Mill Dam is needed specifically, other than that we're not going to make any renewals to it. Willa, do you think we need to make that an official direction?
Madam Chair, yes, I would recommend if the committee has specific direction you'd like to see as far as with any or all of the units, yes, I would suggest a motion.
Thank you. So I will move that the committee recommend to council that no further investments are made in the Paper Mill Dam caretakers residence. And no, that's all. Willa?
So Madam Chair, just to be clear, the residence and the public washrooms could be considered two different spaces. So just wanting to be clear, does that indicate the committee wishes to do work required on public washrooms or not in this case?
Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would expect, and so long-time user of Paper Mill Dam, used to go there fish all the time as a kid, and it is still a very popular place, not just in the summertime, but also during fishing season. I know a lot of people go down and watch First Nations fishing in the middle of Paper Mill Dam's pond. It's an amazing sight. So I think the things that I can agree on would be there's a tenant in there, and that's okay. Once the tenant leaves, we close that down and we don't use it for housing anymore. I'd like to see us keep some washrooms open, and that's pretty much it for right now. So what I was gonna say was just to close the Paper Mill Dam residency once the tenant leaves no later than 2029, because that fits within this cycle. And it does give staff direction to know when the person leaves, that we're gonna close it, and then we can take further action there, so.
Agreed, and that we continue to maintain and upkeep the bathrooms.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So I will just add to my motion, or I said residents, but I will say, and we continue to upkeep the bathrooms over time. And then once the tenant leaves, it would be brought back to council for further discussion.
But at least at that time, because of our direction at this time,
Yes.
we know that when the tenant leaves, that's it. We're gonna close the doors on it, and then we're gonna make a decision.
Perfect. Okay, I think that was seconded by Councillor Solda. Great, go ahead, Councillor Solda.
So another question is regarding some of the issues here. We're talking about severe sagging and leaning, and we're waiting for an inspection. And do we know when that inspection is going to happen? And also, we're talking about a bathtub that is rotting. You know, I know what are we talking about when we say rotting? Is it going through the floorboards, or what is it?
To the chair, the bathtub rotting was more referring to the piping, and some fixes have been made to make it functional and safe. However, a lot of the plumbing is inside the walls. The walls are confirmed to contain asbestos, so to do a fulsome fix or repair, it would be abatement work, then re-drywalling, re-plumbing. So currently, the washroom is safe and usable, but that's just to note that. And then as far as the sagging, we had our city carpenters go in the crawl space and shoot with laser levels, and there are signs of uneven settling. The building inspector had recommended that, so we undertook that, and then we had consulted with a geotechnical to get a report, which I do not have currently, but I will follow up on that.
Councillor Solomon.
That sounds great. I was just kind of worried if it's rust showing on the outside of the bathtub and stuff like that. The sagging, a lot of residents have unsettling in their land and stuff like that. So if it were safe, I'm good.
Thank you. Could the Director of Corporate Services give us a little recap of the motion that I made?
Of course, Madam Chair. Moved and seconded that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council direct administration that no further investments be made to the caretaker residence at Paper Mill Dam Park and that the washrooms be continued to be kept up. I was going to change that wording after.
That sounds great. Thank you. And once somebody moves out, we will, it will come to council for a plan of demolition or boarding up or whatever at the time may be. Councillor Solta.
Just one more question, Madam Mayor. So it says the residence needs rekeying. I mean, those are little things. So, I mean, we still have to maintain some little things around the place. This does not mean to stop the little things. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, staff heard that the only work that will be done is when the Paper Mill Dam tenant, the current tenant departs, we would close up public access to that space. So at this stage, staff would not take any rekeying or otherwise, or regardless of the scope, since the committee would like the entire budget in front of them, it's not staff's intent to make any purchases whatsoever, regardless of scope.
I would say that that is the direction from my perspective on that specific building. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any further comments? Seeing none on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Carried, not opposed. Thank you. Okay, and does anyone want to make any more motions on this?
Let's see. I think, Madam Mayor, if I may, I think the reasoning behind the next one is just to ensure that every park still has a washroom. Since we aren't starting demolition, I think at this time, we just have to understand that we need to just keep the washrooms up right now. I don't know if we need a direction. Maybe I'll ask staff if we need direction on that, but if we're not going to be starting demolition of all of them, then I would assume that status quo is the way we're going.
So, Madam Chair, that's correct. So staff would continue as we currently are. In the event that there are expenditures we expect to incur, of course, staff would come to council and present those, since those would deviate from our current financial plan.
Thank you. And so just for clarity, there's a lot of detail on the projects that need to happen or, challenges with each of the facilities. Are there any of these projects actually within the financial plan in this year or future years currently written?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. So anyone that needed to would come to us. Okay, I think that's great. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Willa, for struggling through that with us. Item number 6, Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society and Railway Operations for 2025.
Madam Chair, welcome to the end of this evening's meeting. So,
Question period's coming.
So just to recap, in April of this year, Council passed a motion to enter into a one-year agreement with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society, or the IHS, to run passenger rail service, including the city providing the IHS almost $174,000 in funding. One of the conditions of support of this initiative is that an environmental insurance policy would be obtained, and at this point, staff have not been able to obtain this type of policy. Since budget discussions have started, staff are following up now to confirm future levels of service with council and the committee, as the IHS has included a $60,000 grant in their 2025 operations plan. That $60,000 is also included in the current iteration of the city's budget as well. And so at this stage, staff recommend that the committee does not extend the agreement with the IHS to run passenger rail service until an environmental insurance policy can be obtained.
Thank you. Councillor Mealy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, so we, sorry, and I apologize, not we, the Industrial Heritage Society and the Alberni Pacific Railway ran this current year, the first year back, without an environmental policy. What is if we had a problem this year getting one, I guess, how should I word this? What's the chances of getting one this coming year? Through you to staff.
Madam Chair, I think it's hard to know at this point. I would expect that with the current scope of control, with the city having sort of this arm's length arrangement with operating the day-to-day operations of the passenger rail service, I see the only opportunity that an insurer may look to provide us that coverage is if that level of control from the city changes or increases. So that since it's the city's insurer, frankly, we would need to have, I would imagine, a greater level of control on this asset for an insurer to provide that level of environmental policy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Director. So what does that increased level look like? Are we talking about everything coming underneath a staff member at City Hall, or are we talking about hiring somebody to be part of the APR? May I just ask that question?
So, Madam Chair, staff have not explored those options yet. I'm merely speaking freely. There is no guarantee at this stage that we could obtain a policy. Staff just wanted to make it clear to the committee, since that was an expectation of council, that policy be in place. That first of all, it's not in place, and at this stage, our insurer will not provide us that policy under the current scope.
Go ahead.
One more time. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I appreciate it. This is my time of night, by the way. I don't sleep very well, so I'm just getting into my own right now. I know people think I'm crazy, honestly. So I guess the question at this time is, if the question is being asked tonight, and I know it's going to go to a council meeting and then it's going to go to budget, but the IHS, the APR have asked for the exact same amount of money, in the operating budget, not the capital, of course, from last year, to run the train. And they ran without the policy this past year. And I would like to say, and I'm not saying it just because they're in the crowd, is that it's been a success. And not only that, if you were down this weekend at the train, it was amazing to see the steam train. And even my dad came and said, "Holy crow, you see the steam come out of that thing?" My dad's almost 80 years old, but that's heritage to him. And there's a big cross-section of this community that really appreciates that. And I appreciate what the APR and the IHS has done this year. What I would like to see, and I understand, and I'm supposed to be unbiased and look at everything on behalf of the city and the people. I would just like to say that I have faith in the APR. They ran it this year without that environmental policy backing us. There was liability to us, of course. And unless there absolutely something happens next weekend, I would consider that a success. I would urge council at this point that we continue to try to get an environmental insurance policy, but that we still recommend to council that we still go forward with an operating agreement for next year for the APR.
Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is hard because it was in many ways a great success this year, and I'm very very happy with, you know, to see it. I was watching it run yesterday, all loaded up with people, and it was awesome. But I wasn't comfortable before with operating without this insurance policy, and I still am not, even regardless of there being a year without incident. That doesn't mean that there couldn't be an incident in the imminent future. So just given the, you know, how significant that could be if there was an environmental incident. I personally do not think that we should be operating the train without a proper insurance policy. And so I'm going to support the motion as it is recommended on.
Thank you. Could someone clarify if the IHS has tried to obtain an insurance policy directly rather than us trying to obtain? Yeah, I'm just wondering if staff knows, and if not, we can ask them to speak.
Yeah, I would recommend engaging the
Richard.
Motion to allow the APR to speak.
Thank you. Yeah, moved and seconded on the motion. All in favor? Carried. Come on up. Thanks, Richard, for being here.
Thanks. We have not, I'll answer your question first, we have not looked into obtaining an environmental policy at this time. I do not know, as this came up, I've been speaking to a few people today actually, and we do not know a railroad that does, or that has been able to obtain an environmental policy. I know the larger railroads insure themselves, and heritage railroads, as far as I'm aware, now I haven't done digging on this, but are not able to get one of those. We do have a accidental pollutants coverage through our general liability insurance. Now, other staff might know, I'm not an insurance person, I'm not familiar with that, but other staff might know more about that. In my mind, that would help cover, but I'm not entirely sure. So hopefully that answered your question.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I guess I'm curious on sort of the commonness of this. I think that that's important to get a little bit of context before we do make a decision. I would agree with Councillor Dame just based on the fact that we had the oil spill at McLean Mill. I feel uncomfortable not having this. However, I'm not an insurance person either, and I don't know what is covered and what is not and what the risks are. So I would say before we, from my perspective, before we pass a firm motion one way or the other, we could probably do a bit more information gathering. Even like, I can't recall if we had this earlier in the year or not, but like a written opinion from our insurer, letting us know, giving us a little bit more insight into what would be covered, what type of activities are covered, and what would be, what we would be at risk for. I think just to have a bit more context before we decide one way or the other. And then I'd also be curious to know if there's potential for the IHS's policy to be increased in a capacity that could satisfy some of our concerns to mitigate risk as well. And Mike, go ahead if you have a comment.
Sure, yeah. I think to get a full environmental policy on the land, we'd have to do background testing to see what the background is before we move forward. It has been an operating train yard, and lots of other items have been used down there, so I'm not sure what that background study would. I believe the incidental that IHS spoke to does cover for small spills or small accidents and incidentals on overland spills. So we can look into it a little more. I know that we did have quite a conversation around direct control and what that means over an activity which the director talked about tonight. But we can get more information and bring it to council for in January when we have more budget discussions about this.
I think that would be helpful. And to me, the issue of us not being able to add it to our insurance makes sense if we're not in control of it. So I see, that perspective. I think, don't have a full picture on what the risks are yet. So in order for us to be able to make an informed decision, I think that would be helpful if we can bring this back and seek a little bit more information. Maybe we can liaise with IHS as well to see some more specifics around what is covered in their policy and what may be possible to be covered in their policy as well. Councillor Haggard.
I was just going to suggest that if you get a copy of their policy, and then we could determine what is covered, and then see what we can add to it.
Thank you. Councillor Dame.
Thank you. So none of this direction conflicts with the recommended motion, which is just that we not fund it until an environmental insurance policy can be obtained. That still would be my preference to make that motion, and I will, unless somebody has an alternate motion that they think is better encompassing of what we're talking about.
I think you're welcome to make that motion for sure, and it will come back to council. So if the motion could come to council with the additional information, I think from my perspective, I'm not clear on if an environmental policy would typically be required for this type of activity or not. So I recognize that we would like it for everything now as a result of being damaged from our last event. But I'm wondering, I'd like more understanding of, I think, what the risks are if we were to proceed without it, and how those risks may be able to be mitigated as a result of other insurance policies, et cetera. So no issue, I think, if you make it, and if council wants to move that forward, it will come to a council meeting regardless with additional information.
All right, well, then with the preamble that I hope people understand that this is not saying that I or we do not want the train to operate, simply that we just need to make sure that we are doing our due diligence and making sure that we have proper coverage for any risk to the community. So I move that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council direct administration to not extend the railway operation and maintenance agreement with the Western Vancouver Island Industrial Heritage Society until an environmental insurance policy can be obtained.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dame. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Haggard. Any comments? Mike.
Through the chair, just to remind council that the current agreement does go till June. So there is time to find that out. It's whether or not, right now, there's no recommendation to remove that from the budget. It would be up to council during budget. So we do have time to contact the insurance. So with this direction, all it means is to do the more investigation before we continue on after June.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, with that, on the motion, all in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Okay, and so we'll bring this back as soon as we have additional information. Thanks. Okay, with that, we have reached question period. This is an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions of the committee. And for those participating electronically, please use the raise your hand feature and you will be called on to speak in the order in which your hand appears. Mr. Anderson.
Long day. Just a couple questions to clarify. I've probably got something mixed up here. It's based on the financial plan applications for the fire hall roof. Now, first of all, you did mention it. How old is the roof? You did mention it, now you're asleep probably.
I think the building was mentioned as a 1967 building, but I don't know if that's the age of the roof or not.
Right, so it's the same roof as when it was built, whatever.
We don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I don't think that was in the report specifically.
It would have been a very good deal. It was a good roof if it is.
It would be, for sure. It will be in the facilities condition assessment, which I think will come to us prior to budget.
And the other one, I'm pretty sure I know the answer. It says on number 5 on that item, to add 400,000 to the 2025 budget from taxation for replacement. Does that mean we're adding 400 to an already existing amount, or is that what the cost of the roof is?
We're not sure. We referred that to budget. Mike, you can speak to it, but we referred it to budget because it wasn't completely clear to council.
Yeah, through the chair, that is the cost of the replacement as per the facility assessment. It's not an addition onto another
Okay,
amount.
thank you. So this brings up another point. I'm not going to get into it too much. If I got the figure right on the age of that specific roof, it would be about $1,500 a year that if we had started. Let me rephrase this. Do we ever look at a building and say, we know our roof is not going to last forever. What's the life expectation of that roof? Should we put something aside? And if we had done, we wouldn't be looking for $400,000. We'd be probably looking for about $1,500.
Yes, that's the work that we've been doing with the facilities master plan and assessment that has just been done. The report has not come to council yet.
Right.
And additionally, over the last 6 or 7 years, we've been working on asset management, planning,
Right.
and that type. So has that been done for the last 60 years? No.
No.
To some extent it has, and I think the city over the decades has made some really good strides in some specific areas. Sewer and water systems were early asset management systems that were in place where we started building up reserves to do that work. That was before I was on council, that I would say some really good work was done to start on that work. However, it has not been broadly done for all of our assets, and that's, I think, why we are in a challenging position.
Right, but you are seriously looking at coming up with a plan for assessing the lifespan of different items on the.
We have done a plan, and it will come to council
Okay,
soon.
thank you.
Thank you. Other questions from members of the public? Joseph?
Very long day for all of us. Just a quick question. I'll do that first. There was mention at this morning's meeting, I think I can bring that up now. City owns 4 parks outside the city limits, which can be disposed of. That was mentioned this morning. They are in the regional district. I take it Paper Mill is one of those. What are the other 3? I don't know.
Somas Park, Seton Park, and McLean Mill.
Okay, good. There you go. Perfect. Thank you. So that was the question. But another thing, just looking at through the agenda for today, there's also mention of the original agreement with the Canadian Mental Health Inc., right? With the original agreement in 2020 when these were kind of leased out. Really interesting read, just reading through the tenants' tenants' covenants in there, what the responsibility of that person that's in there. That's all mentioned in there. There's also their general duties is mentioned in there. Looking after the building, the grounds, getting rid of the garbage, cleaning the bathroom. A lot of stuff is done in there. So it should have done this at the beginning because it's not really a question. But I go to most of the parks, and Paper Mill Dell is one of them. I feel very safe in there. I feel safe sending my wife there with her friends because there is a residence there. There's somebody on duty. They post signs. So it's kind of a cool thing to have in some of the parks. The one down on the on our dike, also nice because there's somebody there. It just feels safer for children. There's play park there. Kind of cool in a couple spots. So that's not really a question, just a comment. But I wish I could form that as a question, but I can't. So I was more interested in the 4 parks. But anyhow, I just see the value in some of these places in these remoter areas. Maybe not in town where you've got a place where there's lots of houses around and commercial buildings around. But some of those places, just kind of cool. As I say, they do that. So how can I form that as a question? Do you use these parks? What do you think of the visibility that's there because there's somebody living there looking after things, monitoring things, making sure there's safety, the signs are posted, cougar in the area, bear in the area, that sort of thing. So do you feel slightly safer having a couple of our parks actually have residents in them?
Councillor Mealy.
Sure, I'll answer that. I do. These are buildings that have been here around forever, much like the fire hall and a lot of things. And historically, they were an ability, not before the CMHA, I believe, was an opportunity for citizens to live in a lower rent, but to contribute to their community as well. So I think it's evolved since the 60s, obviously. But yeah, no, I like Paper Mill Dam's a prime example of that as a kid, going down there knowing full well that if there's a problem, there's somebody right there. And it is off the beaten path as well. So, so I see value in it. However, times change, so.
Thank you, Joseph. Okay, would somebody like to move adjournment?
Move for adjournment, Madam Mayor.
Move to adjourn, seconded by Councillor Haggard, I think. I think it was 10 hours straight of meetings today.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you, yes, meeting adjourned.